technical people. Thank you.
I know, I might just yank it and trip you, you know?
And you dropped it on your desktop, so I can pull that flash drive out? Yeah. Fine.
Excellent. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, March 15th, 2022, and this is the regular meeting of the Governing Board of the Litchfield Elementary School District. I hereby call this meeting to order. We will begin our meeting as we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now I would ask that you join me in a moment of silent reflection to begin our meeting on a calm note. Thank you. If you are following along in our agenda, we are now on agenda item 3A, which is recognitions and celebrations, which will be presented by Mrs. Shelley Hornback.
Good evening. Thank you so much, President Moran, Superintendent Gunning, and members of the Governing Board. It's always my honor and privilege to open our Governing Board meetings with celebrations of our excellence. We who work hard every single day to achieve academic excellence. Pardon me, one moment, please.
I'm sorry, is there an issue?
Members of the Governing Board, there is no issue, but we do have a member of the community requesting that you please speak loudly and close to the microphone so that you can be heard well in this room and online.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's continue, please, with our celebrations of excellence. It's always a pleasure to open our Governing Board meetings with a pause to celebrate the hard work of our students and staff. That's an outstanding opportunity for us to reflect on our achievement and to help us focus and move forward so that we can always stay on course. We have set 3 celebrations today, starting with Odyssey of the Mind, which is an after-school club where students work in teams to creatively solve problems. They work at length to solve a predefined long-term problem, and then they present their solution to the problem at a competition. So here in our award-winning district, we are celebrating 4 teams that are advancing to the state championships in Tucson next month. Our winning teams are the 3rd through 5th grade teams at Mabel Paget Elementary School, Palm Valley Elementary School, and Verado Heritage Elementary School. We also have a winning team of 6th through 8th graders at Verado Heritage Elementary School, who were also awarded the coveted Renatra Fusca Creativity Award for their entertaining and hilarious skit. Of course, these students are supported by their outstanding teacher mentors. Thank you to all of the teachers who sponsor these clubs and their devoted parents and families who support their students' achievement. Please join me tonight in congratulating these Odyssey of the Mind champions, and we wish them well in their next round of competition. Thank you very much. And keeping in our theme of educational excellence, which of course we've been doing for well over a century, we want to take an opportunity tonight to recognize our Litchfield Elementary School District Math Challenge champions. This is an annual tradition of academic competition that's been on hold because of COVID. So we were delighted to unite our students this year to compete against each other as math teams. Special thanks this year to our Math Challenge coordinator, Stacy Minnick. She coordinated the entire event with the support of our transportation department and our host, Verado Middle School. So thank you to the Mustangs, including the Mustang PTO that even sponsored snacks for all of the student competitors and the volunteer judges. Normally, our Math Challenge champions would advance to competition against other districts, but health restrictions are not allowing for that right now. So meanwhile, we are pausing today to celebrate our outstanding Math Challenge champions. We've got a 3rd and 4th grade team from Scott Libby Elementary School. They're all watching online and celebrating with their families at home. A 5th grade champion team from Litchfield Elementary School. The 6th grade champions are from Wigwam Creek Middle School. And our big dogs, the 7th and 8th grade champions, are from Verado Middle School. Congratulations to all of them. Finally, tonight, we want to celebrate big. We have hashtag LESD big news, and that's what this is, because Verado Heritage Elementary School has been named a lighthouse school. This is an outstanding global recognition that has been 7 years in the making. When that school was under construction, they were just starting to move dirt. Principal Franz back then said, "This will be a leader in me school. We will teach students how to sharpen their saw and move forward as a team and creatively problem solve. We will help students be leaders at every single level within this school." And it doesn't stop at students. It includes teachers and staff as well. So they've done that with excellence since the beginning. And then they took it to a much higher level by working hard to become less than 12% of schools across the country are named a lighthouse school. They are among the very best of the best. This is a Franklin Covey education program where our school now is shining across the entire country and world. Thank you so much to Principal Noche, who inherited this program, embraced it fully, inspired your PTSA to invest in it repeatedly, inspired your teachers and your staff and your students to lean in every single day to find the leader in me, to embrace this opportunity as a hero culture in what is belovedly called Hero Land, and then rise as one school family to this global achievement. We are so proud. We honor you, we thank you, and we invite you up for a photograph. This is Principal Noche and some members of her Leader in Me team. They worked hard on their lighthouse status application, and some hero students who have been with us since inception. Come on up. Thank you, President Moran.
Thank you, Mrs. Hornback. I would like to add my own personal congratulations to Principal Noche for an excellent execution of this program. And I would like to invite everyone to stay tuned. The board will be discussing the potential for allowing funds to have Leader in Me implemented on every one of our campuses going forward. And we will have that discussion during our study session at the end of this month. Our next item on the agenda is the year ended June 30th, 2021. Audit reports presentation by Mr. Dennis Osich from Clifton Larson Allen.
All right. Thank you, President. Thank you, Board, for having me here today. My presentation is not nearly as exciting as that, but we will talk about the year ended June 30th, 2021 audit that we conducted. So as you know, an audit is required annually by the state statutes. And so the reports that you should have in front of you, you should have the governance communication, which is really ultimately what I'm doing here today, just describing the audit, what our processes, our procedures are, what our responsibilities are, as well as what management's responsibilities are. You also have the audited financial statements, the single audit report, and then the Uniform System of Financial Records Compliance Questionnaire. And I'll go through each one of those as well. So just giving you an idea of what the audit looks like. We do preliminary field work where we do some of our control testing. We get an understanding of the controls that are in place. We look at any changes within the organization, as well as start some of our single audit testing. We do that as preliminary field work, and we do that for about 1 week in July of 2021. And then we have our final field work where we do a combination of remote and on-site work. So we have about 1 to 2 weeks where we do some off-site work. Some of that's planning, some of that is testing account balances that we can do off-site. And then we were on site for about 2 to 3 days where we actually did a lot of our final work, where we were able to ask a lot of questions, where we were able to get some of the documentation to support some of the account balances. So all in all, we had about 277 hours total involved in doing the audit. We had budgeted about 265, so pretty close to being on budget with that. So real quickly, just at a glance, so the governance communication, as I mentioned, what I'm basically doing here today, but is in writing to you as well. A couple of things I wanted to note that are on here. One are that significant estimates. So in the preparation of the financial statements, there are significant estimates that go into that, meaning they're not hard numbers. So you'll see the estimated useful lives of the capital assets, the net pension and other post-employment benefit liability. Those are based on actuarial reports. The allocation of program revenues, and then compensated absences. So these are some estimates that go into the financial statements. We do audit those estimates. We review those estimates, determine that they're reasonable, because they do have an impact on the financial statement numbers themselves. Just a couple of other things just to note. We had one uncorrected misstatement. What that basically means is that we identified an adjustment that was immaterial, but we do need to disclose that, which is included in our communication. So that was not recorded within the financial statements. But we had no material audit adjustments as part of audit, no material weaknesses. And then the only other thing I wanted to note was previously the student activities account was reported as what's called a fiduciary fund. And all you saw was the assets and liabilities, because essentially the district was holding that in a custodial nature. It's student monies. GASB statement, which is what we follow, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, had a new statement that came out. And based on the determination, that fund is now reported as a special revenue fund. And so you'll see that in the financial statements as a special revenue fund. So the audited financial statements, just a couple things at a glance. We did issue an unmodified opinion, or a clean opinion. So we are basically saying that the financial statements are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And then a couple things within the financial statements to note: there was a $7 million bond issue during the year. The M&O fund balance had about a $9.9 million fund balance, which is a healthy fund balance for the M&O fund. And then you'll see the pension liability. This is the Arizona State Retirement Pension Liability. It increased by about $18.4 million. And just a note on that is that really you have no control over that. That is the state retirement system, which is a cost sharing plan. And the liability is recorded in every participating member's financial statements. And the way it gets recorded is based on your percent of the total contributions for the plan. And so that was an increase. And you'll see that liability increase and decrease from year to year. There's a lot of factors that go into that. One of the biggest factors being how well the investments perform. But then there's also some of the actuarial studies that go into it. If there's any type of changes in the discount rate or any type of actuarial figures. The single audit report, there's two reports included in there. One we commonly refer to as the GAS report, or the Yellow Book report. That's the Government Auditing Standards report. We had no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. So this is a report on the internal controls over the financial statements themselves. So if we identified anything where we felt needed to be brought to your attention as either a significant deficiency or material weakness, where we either felt the controls lacked such that it could cause a material misstatement of the financial statements, or we actually identified a material misstatement, we would bring that to your attention. The other report is the UG report, or the Uniform Guidance Report. So this is where we're giving an opinion on compliance with the major federal programs. And so you'll see that we issued an unmodified or a clean opinion on that as well. We also report on internal controls, but we don't give an opinion on internal controls. And so what that means is essentially if the internal controls over compliance, again, if we had any deficiencies that we felt should be brought to your attention, those would be included in there as well, and we had none. And then the last report is the Uniform System of Financial Records. There's no opinion that's issued. This is essentially a 40-page compliance questionnaire, yes or no answers. And there's about 272 questions all in all that we have to go through and answer. That's been submitted electronically to the Arizona Auditor General, and we had no no's on that, which is extraordinary. Usually we have something related to usually attendance or student activities or something, but we had no items to report on that. So a couple things on the audited financial statements that you'll see. We do an audit of the basic financial statements. So those are the statements that you'll see right before the notes to the financial statements. And that's what we're ultimately giving an opinion on. There are major funds that are listed, and those are funds that meet certain criteria as far as the percentage of assets, liabilities, revenues, or expenses. And then there's also other information in the financial statements that we disclaim an opinion, or we don't give an opinion at all. And that would be the required supplementary information and the statistical section. And the reason for that is because the required, both of those sections really provide multi-year type of information. And so obviously we can't give an opinion on 10 years worth of data, but we do read that information for consistency within the financial statements. And how do we conduct the audit? So the audit itself is actually conducted on a risk-based approach. Every organization has risk, whether you want to admit it or not. And if you don't think you do, you probably have more risk than you think. But so the areas that we identified as having a higher risk are management override of controls, revenue recognition, cash and investments, and capital assets, and then just the financial close process. So what that means to us is that when we identify risk, is that we design our procedures to perform more detailed testing in those areas so that we can have assurance that the financial statements are fairly stated. It doesn't mean that we ignore some of those other areas. It just means that we don't have as detailed testing that we do on some of those areas. I went through the single audit report. As I mentioned, the government auditing standards report, we do not issue any opinion, but we just report on internal controls over financial statements. So no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies. And then the uniform guidance report, we do provide an opinion on compliance. And as I mentioned, it was a clean opinion. And then we'll provide also an in relation to opinion on the schedule of federal expenditures. So those are the total federal awards that were spent during the year. And we're saying it's fairly stated as it relates to the basic financial statements themselves. So the major programs that we looked at as part of the single audit, we looked at the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which you probably know better as the ESG fund. And there was about $4.9 million in expenditures related to that. And then the other one was the Education Stabilization Fund. And you probably know it as the ESSER fund. There was about $768,000 in federal expenditures for those two programs. So total federal awards that were spent during the year were $12 million. We tested about 5.7 million of that. So we actually tested 47.5% of the total federal expenditures. The federal guidelines require us to test a minimum of 20%. So we tested well more than the 20%. And as I mentioned, we issued a clean opinion with no compliance findings. And then there were no findings in the prior year as well. And then, as I mentioned, the Uniform System of Financial Records, I pretty much covered this, no opinion issued, and we had no exceptions that we noted. Basically a 40-page yes or no document with about 272 questions related to it. So before I open it up for any questions that you might have, I just want to thank Ms. Walls for all of her help and her team related to the audit. I think that this is a great reflection on how the business department is doing and has done in the past historically as well. But just want to thank her for all her hard work. It's not just probably our 277 hours, but probably double that for her, if not more. So appreciate all of her assistance. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that any of the board members have.
Do any board members have any questions?
No, thank you for putting this together, and I will second that. Thank you, sincere thank you to Wendy and her team. I know this is a lot of work to have an audit and to have someone doing your job right along with you while you're still doing it. So thank you to everyone on staff that helped as well.
I will third that by also saying that not only is it the audit, but it's Executive Director Quall's attention to detail and compliance every day throughout the year that leads to a clean audit like this, and the assurance that us as board members have in your department and the competence that you have. So I appreciate you and I thank you. If there are no questions, I don't have any myself, then I will thank you for your presentation as well, Mr. Osich.
All right, thank you.
Next up on our agenda is item 3C, which is our K through 8 math curriculum adoption presentation by Executive Director DeCoste.
Yes. President Moran, members of the board, thank you. The presentation tonight will be by iReady. Joe and his team are here from iReady to talk about the one of the two that we field tested and the one that the committee has chosen. We also have members of our committee here tonight to support and offer any support or guidance that you guys might have after their presentation, but I'll turn it over to Joe.
First of all, thank you to the board. My name is Steve Chandler, and I am the educational sales consultant assigned to Litchfield School District. We're presenting Ready Classroom tonight, and I just want to introduce myself and also part of my team too, Miss Susie Meyer. Want to get up?
Hi, I'm Susie Meyer. I am our PD manager that's based here in Arizona. Then I'll continue to work closely with you if this moves forward. So thank you.
And presenting tonight will be Joe Cooper.
Thank you for having us. As we go through this, if there are any questions, please let us know. A couple of things. First off, this is a program designed to be easy for teachers and for students. And so from print or digital perspectives, one of the other things is the assessment suite is part of this purchase. It's included in the cost. It is an adaptive K-12 diagnostic assessment that allows you to very clearly see where students are. It's a highly regarded product that provides a plethora. That's my word of the day from my word of the day calendar. So I'll use that a couple of times. A plethora of different reports so that teachers are able to very quickly analyze where students are, and then they have access to specific information. So for example, if I'm looking at my class roster, I can see both where my students are overall with respect to grade, but also within particular domain areas. And so it just provides teachers that powerful insight. Additionally, one of the other reports that comes from this directly tied to the product is a prerequisite report. So as teachers are thinking about what they're getting ready to teach, what students need to know to be successful with that, and then where students are with respect to that knowledge, one of the other reports that's generated, the prerequisite report, allows them to very clearly see, first off, for each cluster of lessons they're getting ready to teach, what the prerequisites are, and the groups of students within each of those categories. Students that have the prerequisites, students that, if push came to shove, would be successful. They could use a little additional support. And then students that actually have some gaps in their learning, some unfinished learning. And for each of these, as the teacher clicks on the recommendations, it provides specific support where appropriate, student-led opportunities or teacher-led opportunities or independent student work. Again, just providing teachers with access to everything that they need to fill some of those gaps to support those students as they move through. And when we think about things like the teacher-led, we're talking about high quality resources that were created specifically for that purpose. And while we're talking about those high quality resources, every teacher will now have access to every grade level resource from kindergarten through 8th grade in a digital filing cabinet. So if they need resources for instruction, for intervention or differentiation, they can access any material from any grade. It's going to be sequenced according to their grade with that tight alignment to our state standards so that they have access to everything that they need in one easy to access location. The way the program is organized is around grade level themes called units. Those are then broken down into our specific state standards at the lesson level. And each one of the lessons are multiple days We call each of those days of instruction a session. So when you think about our sessions, a lesson is comprised of these 3 boxes that you're looking at. The first session, called Explore, is an opportunity for students to bridge from the prerequisites. So as we think about the progression of standards across grades, the prerequisite topic or the extension of that particular standard might have come from a prior grade. This is an opportunity for students to make those connections so that then as we move into the next day or multiple days of developed sessions, students have the foundation, they're able to connect and build that understanding. And then they always finish with 1 or 2 in the early primary refine days, opportunities for students to make sure they've mastered. And it's another opportunity for teachers to intervene if necessary. There's differentiation and support throughout the program, but this is another day allowing teachers to actually support students. When we talk about supporting our language learners, you'll see that there's a lot within this program that supports our language learners. Things like a complete can-do chart at the beginning of every unit, allowing teachers to see what language learners within those 4 language domains at any level of language acquisition, what they're capable of doing, as well as a focus on how we can invite all of our learners to actually bring their history, their culture, their experience into the lesson. And you'll see that that same level of support extends into every single lesson, where session by session, we provide opportunities, exemplars for ways that students can be invited to bring their past, ways that teachers can scaffold and support for language learners, and then the family letters, inviting families to actually see what it is that we're doing within the classroom, supporting. That focus on language, and especially on our language learners, allowed partner districts like Isaac School District to be able to meet their EL requirement using our product. And so that partnership is important to us. The program itself then is focused very tightly on aligning to our state standards so the teachers can quickly and easily see if it's the major work or if it's supporting or additional work within a grade level, but they can very quickly and easily see that focus. That same focus extends as we begin thinking about that progression of learning, so that within a grade, that center column is within my grade, the progression. So if I'm looking at, this is a 4th grade lesson, I can also see, though, off to the left, what came before from a prior grade, 3rd grade or even 2nd grade, so that I can see how those standards are building within my grade from prior grades and then to future grades as well. Making sure that teachers are able to see very quickly and easily those connections. And then even at the lesson level, you'll see that same focus on what the standards are addressing, but being able to see now at the lesson level what that progression of standards is, so that I can see what happened previous, what students should come to me with, what I'm teaching at my grade, and then beyond. You'll also see things like content as well as language objectives listed for teachers and their full pacing, all of the support pieces that are there in one easy to access location, just providing that support for teachers. While we're talking about that support, as they begin looking, they'll see that same progression, lesson by lesson, identifying where students may be along that learning continuum, so that they have access to what can I do at a very concrete level, and where am I trying to build for students that need to get to that more abstract level. And then you'll notice that unit flow, little kind of teal box in the upper left. Our unit flow and progression videos are available not just for teachers, but for families as well. And it's powerful that families as well as educators are able to see what this progression is. I want to play a piece of this for you just so you see what a powerful tool this is.
So here's the context. Peggy had 22 boxes of crayons. Each box had 25 crayons. How many crayons did Peggy have? So to begin to develop this understanding, some students might go ahead and draw out 22 boxes of crayons and put 25 crayons inside each box and count them out 1 to 1. Other students might go ahead and draw out 22 boxes and just write the numbers 25 and skip count up. Either way, these are additive strategies. And it's in this unit that we want to get students to move from additive to multiplicative strategies. So here we'll create an area model for multiplying 22 times 25. So we set up our factors on the outside of our area. And when we multiply our factors on the outside, we see that 10 times 10 is 100. And then we continue to build out this model with the understanding that the factors are on the outside and the product is on the inside. So once we've developed a concrete conceptual understanding, we want to move to a representation. So here is where students can go ahead and create an area model, a representational partial product area model. And then it might not be efficient to always use or represent it as an area model, so we can use it as partial products. And this is a standard element.
That gives you an idea of what that background information for teachers is, focusing on that progression of learning and understanding, but also providing that level of insight to families so that as they're thinking about how they can support their child within this learning, it provides that background, that information for them as well. Powerful tools. The lessons themselves are built on the mathematical practices and then the high leverage teacher actions that support those, so that as students are going through, we're asking them to first make sense of a rich applied problem. Once they've made sense of that problem, using things like a 3 reads routine, providing support for teachers to develop language to make sense, we then want them to dive into that productive struggle. We're not telling them how to do the mathematics. We're relying on the fact that that learning progression has given them some background insight so that then they can actually attack the problem in the way that makes sense to them, so that they can actually connect with that mathematical problem. And then we want them to begin to have conversations about this, first in small groups or partners, so that the teacher is able to get some insight into what's happening and what students actually understand. Knowing that students are going to solve problems in a multitude of different ways, being able then to identify the strategies from where students are within their classroom that then get them to where they need them to be within that particular lesson. Honoring students, their level of understanding, where they enter into the problem, and then using those as the springboard to extend that learning. We provide anchor models that if a student didn't use one of the strategies that we need them to understand, we will allow them to make sense of those. But then we position those as another strategy along with the strategies they've already brought forth, so that as we begin having conversations collegially within the class, the teacher is guiding that conversation so that students are connecting and learning and growing mathematically. It's important that as we think about how we're going to select and sequence student work, if we start with a student at a very foundational level, that upper left corner, in a very physical sense coming up, by the way, this problem is chairs are set up in a school auditorium for a play, 16 rows of chairs, 28 chairs in each row, and a student actually created a very physical model. But we want them to notice that the student that came after them used an area model so that they can begin to make connections between those two different solution strategies. Or a student that actually decomposed one of those numbers, the 16, into 10 and 6 and found 2 partial products, that if a student did it as a vertical partial products model, students are able to make connections between those different presented strategies in class so that they're making those deep driving connections, supporting the teacher all along the way with what should you ask, what should you listen for, so that then when we get to the connect questions, we're not providing a different model because the models have already been provided by students, by the exemplars from the book, so that students now are able to make connections within and across those different models. So we can ask questions like number 4 here. Would the product change if the 20 plus 8 on the top of that area model were changed to 10 plus 10 plus 8? And this allows us then to use things like our virtual manipulatives that students and teachers have access to in and outside of class so that they can actually adjust that model to that 10 plus 10 plus 8. and then verify for themselves that it looks different, there are different partitions, but it's actually the exact same area. The support for teachers, I already mentioned the toolbox that gives every teacher access to every resource, K through 8, but there's also different support within the book, different differentiation options, like when appropriate, providing hands-on activities or ways to deepen understanding or ways to connect back to the real world, or suggestions for language learners and how to support them, all right there at point of use with additional strategies in that teacher toolbox. Making sure that if we're thinking about depth of knowledge levels and identifying what those are and where those are, and when necessary, providing still additional reteach, extend, reinforce options for teachers. It really is a comprehensive series that provides students with plenty of practice opportunities within a lesson and then within the entire series. Our early learners in kindergarten through second grade have access to engaging games that are appropriate at grade level. Everything available in print, but then there are additional learning games that are digital opportunities for students to engage. There are practice opportunities in print, but there are also digital practice opportunities. So whatever strategy teachers need, they will have parallel versions, print or digital or both, because they're different problems. Lots of opportunities for teachers to support students where they are. And when it comes to assessments, we already talked about at the bottom of the list, that universal screener, which is part of the program. Included in that assessment suite is also our standards mastery assessment. So if teachers are looking at a particular standard that students should have mastered as identified within the program, they can assess students according to that standard. Use it as a benchmark to assess a single or multiple standards, whether they're on or off grade level, full reporting for everything. When it comes to assessments, again, available in multiple formats, print, but then there are digital versions of those that have been created through the comprehension checks. And anything that's done digitally, teachers have access to full reporting so that they can see exactly how their students did. From the family perspective, access is a single access point for all students. In that single access, they'll be able to see anything that the teacher assigned to them, whether it's a comprehension check, one of those digital assessments, if it's access to their book, or if it's a parallel lesson that's been assigned to them. The lessons are all engaging, where students are immediately asked to jump in and do something, and then they're given feedback. If they answer correctly, it's affirmative. That's right, because if it's incorrect, they're given some sort of scaffolded support and asked to try the problem again. But it's about engaging students and allowing them to find success. They can access their book digitally as well. And then in the family center, that's where those unit flow videos that we looked at are. But this is also where families can find, for every single lesson, a letter outlining what it is that we're doing in that lesson, how it might be different, things that they can do to engage students at home. And those are available in multiple languages. In the English book, they're in English. In the Spanish book, they're in Spanish. But through this, or teachers can access them through that teacher toolbox, they're available in multiple languages where appropriate for families as well. It's for what I've shown you now and for other reasons that this is a program that is highly rated by all sorts of third-party groups. This is a company that believes in education, believes in students, and constantly strives to work with our partners to improve our product and what it is that we offer. And because of that partnership, the results that we have, again, third-party groups that we enlist to actually do research on our behalf, large studies where we show not just that students have success, but year over year, students have success as we partner with districts and help you to grow and change, including places like right here in Arizona, Sahuarita, just a little south of us, okay, quite a bit south of us. But they've found that that partnership has worked for them and allowed them to move from being below the state average to now exceeding the state average in terms of their assessment scores and results. I have a short video that I'd like to share with you, because for me to stand here and for our partners here that have been a part of this committee, this is just kind of a statement from folks that have used our product, just so you can kind of see what they think.
What operations are we going to need to use? When I taught math before, I would give my students a lot of problems, but I would show them my strategy to solve it. Now I would expect them to use my strategy. Now they're noticing that my students are not relying on me to show them how to do it.
So many times the students would just kind of listen to what the teacher was saying and kind of write it down and, you know, just kind of regurgitate what she's thinking. But this way, the students are really owning their thinking. And then when sharing it, they feel very empowered that their strategy is a good strategy. So I had 70, so I got other ones to figure, and I had 83. So that's why. I feel that the students are really picking up the concepts and the strategies a lot easier and quicker because they are having those conversations with each other. Although they're listening to my instruction, I think hearing it from a peer and hearing what their classmates do and how they use different strategies really helps get them thinking about ways that they can use different strategies. I have to think a different way because sometimes this way I do. It's different. How could you help her? I've heard several teachers tell me as I come into the classroom, my kids know much more and are able to do much more at this point this year than they've ever been able to do at this point in previous years. And I've been teaching 12, 13, 14 years. The biggest difference I've seen in my students is that I can give my students the problem and they will attack it any way that they can. So they're much more empowered as learners.
As we mentioned early on, it's about the partnership, the relationship. We're here. We have people that are here from professional development, from account management, looking behind the scenes at how students are doing, having those conversations. The support is there, and it's not an 800 number. It's a person whose name and contact classrooms and teachers have access to. That's kind of where my time ends. And so now it's up to any questions you have from anyone on our team or from any of the teachers that were part of the entire process.
I got a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. The family center, is that, it looks like on the literature, at least I'm looking at the PowerPoint, is that it's on a like a piece on a laptop. Is it available on a phone app?
I believe it can be accessed.
The website itself can be accessed through a phone app, which has some family resources. And the actual one that students log into through iReady can be accessed on like an iPad, but not for the phone.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Family Center through Ready Classroom, iReady Classroom, that can be accessed from any device. And that's where they're going to find a lot of support. But the actual student portal, because of the fact that they can access the manipulatives, et cetera, it's not optimized for a phone. So it would have to be some sort of a tablet or a computer device like that.
The functionality of keyboard, let's say on the Samsung platform, and stuff like that, just it won't get the functionality of the program.
Yeah, what I was really thinking of is that if how parents can monitor what's going on with their kids' achievement. So I'm not, so I get it that for kids, you know, using it, but either, if, I mean, you can access anything with a browser on a phone, but can you actually, use it? So sometimes optimized or whatever, because my concern is that a lot of the students that are the lowest achieving are, basically, they may not have laptops, Wi-Fi, this, that, whatever, are convenient, and their parents, and because I know they give out laptops, but a lot of the parents don't, and but everybody's got a smartphone, so that to me is a big deal. Are there any permanent resources that students could come back to later in life? So let's just say that they, I don't know, needed, I can't think of a lot of elementary school examples, but I know that, you learn math and then later you forget it, you know what I mean? And then you're, oh my gosh, you got a problem that you need to do something in math. Is there anything that it's permanent that they can go back and access to kind of, give them, jog the memory or get some facts?
So remember that the program, the core of the program is a student write-in text. So anything that they journaled, anything that they did as part of that classwork, that would be a permanent record that would stay with that student. And then they would be able to access that anytime they wanted.
Yeah, but they're nothing, but that they may not have that with them. So then,
Sure.
and then I thought I understand the math example, the with all the little methodology and whatever, but honestly, I think that a lot of I mean, math, you just need to get your facts, you know what I mean? I mean, you can't really move ahead because you're gonna be doing calculus, whatever, algebra at a minimum, and get into things where you're not gonna, you don't have time to go. I mean, this is great. I learned in physics how to derive a Lorentz contraction. Okay, that takes a little bit, and learning that how is important. Okay, to kind of get, things that most people can't even think about. But in terms of normal math, higher math, you really just need facts. It just needs to pop in your head. I mean, example of 28 times whatever it was, 16.
16, right?
You should be able to do that in your head. 280 plus, 6 times 30 is 180 minus 12. Bada bing, bada boom, and you can't. So that's the problem that I have, is that it seems like it's really making something complicated that it shouldn't be a process. It should just be memorization.
So while I agree with you, the problem with memorization, and no disrespect, I was at a board meeting and a board member asked me exactly the same thing. It happened to be in Alaska, not that that matters, and said 9 times 6 is 45. It's just a fact that everyone should know. And I stopped and I said, sir, the problem is 9 times 6 is not 45. How do you know whether it is or whether it isn't? So if you memorize something incorrectly, you're absolutely right that recall is important. It's important that students know those facts, but they have to have something in their mind to be able to understand where that fact came from, so that later on, when memory begins to fail, they have something concrete that will make those connections for them. And that's the point. It's not that we're trying to muddy the waters. And if a group of students understand foundationally, the power of this program is that the teacher is able to move them along as efficiently as they need to. They don't need to worry about foundational skills if they already understand the foundation and move to those more advanced, the fact memorization that you were talking about. But you have to remember that we're also building the foundation for things like algebra. So as we begin talking about FOIL, multiplying binomials together, binomials times trinomials, that we're building the foundation now within this elementary program that will extend all the way into college and beyond for those students. And so there has to be a foundation built there that can support the memorization, if it holds or not.
But I think you just gave an example of multiplying by nines. Okay, so when you, so as far as I can tell, I mean, you don't learn all the things. You start out with one and there's patterns to threes, there's patterns or whatever. So 9 is a tough one, okay? But fortunately, there's an easy rule. You multiply by 10 and then you subtract the number that's not 9. And so you're always going to be able to find that very, very quickly, even though you don't have. So the memorization isn't necessarily wrote all the numbers, but you've developed an algorithm for each one of them. And they're very, very, very simple algorithms. And I think there's a lot of merit in memorizing those algorithms instead of leaving it as a process. So anyway, but I think that a parent is going to really have a hard time following along with that example there, whereas, couple rules of memorizing the 9s or memorizing whatever they're going to be able to so those are just that's my question.
And I would
Sure.
love to add on to that real quick, that if you look at the current research from NCTM, that having those conversations is what really creates that lasting memorization. And in addition to that, there are the practice pieces that Joe went through. There are the fluency practice pages, and there are the learning games that go through that math fact fluency also. So that is part of the program, but that initial learning that really kids are going to build that conceptual understanding, which is going to move to lasting memory, is through really looking at those different strategies and building that.
Actually, I did have one more question, and I don't want to monopolize. I'm sorry, but we really are in a situation where, I'm an old guy, okay, but back when I went to school and, I wasn't a particularly good student starting out or anything like that, but, we had the best schools in the world. I mean, there was nobody even close. Now, I believe we're 18th in math, we're 13th in language. I thought we were up in the 30s a few years ago, so maybe we've recovered some ground, but still that's not too good. So everything seems to be, I mean, we didn't use stones and stone tablets when I was a kid, but pretty darn close. Okay. I mean, there was no such thing as was in my 20s and, I bought a calculator with my credit card, a gas credit card. And I just sat there and, divided things by 11 and went, 07. But, no, we learned math with nothing and slide rules and went to the moon and all that kind of thing. So I really have an issue with and I'm not picking on your program at all. Maybe it's better than a lot of other ones, but it seems like we're really making things into a complex situation. And so, like one of my questions is how's this going to work? We have 29% of our 8th graders proficient in math. Well, if it's a factory, that's the final, out the door, the final product is going out there. 71% of kids can't do math. You don't need the statistic. You just go to a fast food place and then change the amount of money you want to give them and see the blank stares on their face when they don't know, and you have to tell them, give me back this much money, and they look at you and go, oh, okay. So where this is all this analytics to go back and look at student B and find out what they learned 2 grades before and they didn't learn and all this kind of stuff. But that's overwhelming to a teacher when they got the whole class, that's we need a bulldozer, not an intricate tool, to do that. And to me, that's really the concern we have right here, in our school district. And I don't think we're that much different than lots of them. So how is this going to take kids that just are so hopelessly behind?
So I think that's actually a question for our administrators to answer in the implementation of this curriculum program. Would one of our administrators like to answer that now, or should we address that during item 7A?
Well, I'd like to hear they're here. Do they have an answer? I mean,
Well, they won't be implementing this program.
Pardon?
They will not, these folks who are presenting to us right now will not be implementing this program. They are providing us with the curriculum and our administration will be implementing it. So I think our administration would be better equipped to answer that question.
Well, good. You could ask the instrument. Can I just get an answer from them, please?
So first, I would like to say this. I would like to be invited back after your first year of implementation. We can have this conversation and we can actually look at scores and how students have progressed and what that's done. Many of our students that are struggling mathematically and have been the forgotten crowd, the people who've been left behind, that 28% you were talking about, those are the students that need to be able to connect it to something, to have that opportunity to fill some of those gaps. And that's what we're offering, is an opportunity for every student to be successful from that 28% all the way to the top 1% of a grade level. It's about allowing them all to make those connections and all to have that success. Did you?
I wasn't talking 28%, I'm talking 71% are not proficient.
And one thing I'm going to add on, you said is all of that data can be overwhelming. And I totally agree if we're looking student by student. But if we look at some of those reports, like the prerequisite report that helps me group my kids, that these kids have a common need, and help me do some filling of some of that unfinished learning and help me really scaffold what they need so I can get them up to grade level. Because we know many of them, that 71% is coming to us behind grade level and need some of those extra supports.
Thank you.
There are resources within the program that are designed to scaffold for an entire class as well, that are going to allow students that have some of that unfinished learning and gaps to be successful. So there are things to focus on students, groups of students, or an entire class to support that learning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other board members have any questions? Go ahead, Board Member Clymer.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's exciting to see. It's been a long time since this district has had the resources to purchase something like this. So if we ask a lot of questions, I think it's because we're excited and inquisitive, because we've, had different resources in the past. And this is exciting to see this come to pass, actually having this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, or just question a little bit, the sort of package of this, and whether, Gina, you want to answer this question, or if you guys do, I'll leave it up to you, whoever's best equipped to do that. So you mentioned in your presentation that there's an online portion, there's a print portion, there's workbooks, there's all of these things. So all of sort of the tangible items, obviously those are for individual students. So from a cost perspective, every year we're going to have additional costs, because the students next year have to get a workbook, that they have to get sort of all of these things. So what is the ongoing cost for this on a yearly basis, just based on the required sort of tangible things that students will need year over year?
So the quote that we're looking at would be a 3-year quote for refilling our consumables every year, just like we're doing with our Wonders and with our Foundations programs.
Okay, so the cost that we're seeing now includes all of that for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we do not have a final quote for you guys. We're not moving through finalizing procurement until it's approved by the governing board.
Okay. Kind of along those same lines, professional development. I know you mentioned that you're going to be doing part of that for the district. So we obviously do a lot of just district professional development. This is different with your specific product. So talk to me a little bit about your strategy in coming into a place that, this is the first time we've ever had your program. And, unfortunately you're coming in, you're meeting with us in a time of, we have teacher shortage and we have teacher burnout. We have all of these things going on. But we know that while teachers are really excited to get something like this, it's also a heavy lift for them to have to learn an entire new program. So talk to me a little bit about how that works and what your strategy is to sort of overcome some of those obstacles.
Definitely. We believe in ongoing professional development, because when you are shifting the way you teach, it takes some time to really go in and learn a piece, go in, start implementing it, come back and say, okay, here's what I'm struggling with, and learn a little bit more and continue moving forward. So what we're looking at right now is coming in before the school year's out and doing like an intro so that teachers can get into it if they want to over the summer and start looking at it and become familiar with it. And then coming back to school and digging in even deeper with those teachers so that they understand more of it and are ready to go into the classroom and implement. Typically, we come back about 6 to 8 weeks into the school year, and now even go further into it and say, okay, here, what does it look like? What are those things that you're really being successful with? What are those things that you're struggling with? Also, hey, you've got some data at this point. Let's dig into some of your data and see what that looks like. And then we have another touch point that typically happens in January or February in that first year. With ongoing years, we typically do 2 or 3 touch points. And we've started to talk about, at least for this first year, what that could look like with some early releases or PD days so that we're not pulling teachers out of the classroom for those pieces.
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned data, and I don't know, again, if this is on your side or maybe on our side. We have been talking a lot this school year about data because we've seen it so many times as we're looking at kind of our learning recovery and kind of coming back from COVID. We are enacting a new data system in our district. And so seeing that you have assessments and all of these sort of data collection points is amazing. How does that ladder up to the system that we have? Because having them in multiple places is not necessarily desirable for at a larger district level to be able to see how all of that works together. So have there been, kind of compatibility studies or something to make sure that whatever data we get from this, we can actually utilize in the new data system that we're procuring?
So if you think about this as curricular assessments, and you think about our other assessments in the beginning as like our benchmark assessments in our district level, like a broad perspective of assessments, these are checks all along the way based on the curriculum and the standards and what they're learning in the classroom. It's not really going to export this data into the other system, but this is super handy and easy for teachers on a daily basis. Like the one slide where he showed off the diagnostic, it already grouped the kids for you and then already tells what standards those students need to be working on, and the teachers can set up, they can do math centers and pull small groups and have all of their standards-based activities going on for each child at each different level during the whole thing. So they're two different things, but they'll work together, and we're talking and learning as we go about how to do that. So
yeah, I mean, I think there is crossover just in the fact that there are data points for all of these students. So even though our benchmarks are, district benchmarks, they're at a much higher level. I think just having a place where you can have all of this information. I mean, people having to look all different places. I think that was part of the point of having that sort of data warehouse, was being able to have all of these systems sort of ladder up. So not to say that you would have every single touch point here. I mean, that would be a daily lesson or whatever. But just being able to have some of the data that's housed in here in the bigger assessments, I do think is important to at least make sure there's some compatibility there, but that's, for future. But
and you can export data out of iReady to upload into other programs. So we would just want to get the account manager, Chris, involved in that and talk about how that would work with your system. But that is something a lot of our districts do. So they do have it in iReady and also in some of those other data warehouses.
Okay, thank you.
thanks, Susie.
We can create custom exports too, if that's something that works depending on the conversation.
Okay. I don't know enough about it to answer that question. I appreciate you. Someone here in this room probably knows a lot more about that than I do, but thank you for offering that.
Sure.
My last question is, and this probably isn't for you again, I'm sorry, Gina, is for you. Will the entire district be practicing this curriculum? Or I know TA has been different. We've had some other different groups. Will this be across the board?
This will not be for traditional academy. So we'll be across the board K-8 at all of our schools, but not currently. We're not planning for traditional academy, but we would like for a school to pilot it in traditional academy.
To see what it's like. Okay.
I've got one question. What other school districts in the valley are using this program?
We actually work with many districts in the valley. Alhambra is on their 6th year of implementation of this program. Isaac School District's going into year 4. Phoenix Elementary is in, I think this is their 2nd year moving forward. Scottsdale uses it with their middle school, their 6 through 8. So a lot of different districts do use it. And Joe had referenced Isaac School District with their EL learners and how they actually had their English language skills improve because of the discourse that was happening in math class. So it actually impacted more than just math. It also impacted those reading skills.
Do you, which school district has had you the longest?
The longest in the valley would be Alhambra. And actually in one of the videos, Matt Miller, who is currently their district math curriculum person, was a teacher that you got to hear talk about the program and how his kids really benefited from having that conversation.
Okay.
Board Member Zeidema, do you have any questions?
I do not, but I thought this was a fantastic presentation. Obviously, none of us up here are really curriculum experts. You really made it simple for us to understand. I appreciate that. As a parent, I really liked to see the breakdown. I know that sometimes the way we teach math now can seem confusing to some people, but I have seen as a parent myself in breaking down the numbers and what a benefit that is for students to really be able to visualize what a number looks like. And so I think it's great that those resources are there for parents to help them to be able to help their kids, because sometimes I do feel like parents feel like they can't help them right now with the new way we're teaching things, but it's actually a benefit to them. So I think that it'll be a great resource for our families to keep them engaged.
What is the name of the guy, the teacher he was in the video that's at Alhambra?
Matt Miller, he was a teacher when we implemented, and he's moved up to being their district curriculum. I don't know what his actual title is, district curriculum math. I don't know. He's the district math guy.
Right.
Sounds official. I'll take that. Yeah.
I would like to reiterate the appreciation for the presentation. I agree with Board Member Zeidema in that I am a creature of habit. And when my children started learning all of these different ways to do math, I was initially a rebel and said, why would we be doing this? Why wouldn't we just memorize all the facts? And I now realize that they have a much better and diverse grasp on the actual concepts of numbers that can be more theoretical. In addition, I think a program like this will help all different types of learners be able to find the best way that works for them and their brain and how their brain functions. So I think it's fantastic, and I'm super excited about potentially having this impact all the students in our district. Thank you.
Can I make just one more quick comment? Although none of us asked questions directly of the committee, I just want to say thank you. I know that piloting a new program and doing it in a crazy year, and trying to decide between multiple platforms and learning how to do it while still making sure that the students learn and are engaged and parents know what's going on, is not an easy situation to be in. So thank you for being the guinea pigs and going out and trying it and doing it. Gina, thank you for shepherding that process, because I think we have seen that getting it in the hands of teachers and figuring out what actually works in the classroom and what doesn't. And while the presentation is wonderful, it may seem like a great idea. And then when you get it into implementation, it's just does not work the way that it said it was going to. So I'm glad to see that you selected one that you thought was going to be the best fit. So thank you to everyone who participated and gave us your time, because we really do appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you. I just wanted to say one more thing. Thank you for saying that. I was going to say the same thing, and thank you to Heidi and Carrie and Stacy for coming tonight and being available if there were questions, and also just the support that iReady team has given us throughout this process is a great indicator to us of what's coming in the future. I mean, we had professional development opportunities 4, 5, 6 times. Susie was adamant about getting in and doing it, and then she had open office hours. So if, we had the PD, plus you had open office hours, there was plenty of support for our teachers. And I think that really helped give them a deeper understanding of the program and really access it as fully as they could in a short amount of time to get a good idea. So thank you, everyone, the team and our team.
That's right. Well, the invitation is open for you to come back in a year and tell us all about your success. Please do.
Yes, thank you. And I believe we will continue the discussion with potentially reviewing additional feedback from the adoption committee in agenda item 7A. Now we will move on to agenda item 4, which is the community opportunity for comment and the call to the public. I will read the disclaimer, and then I will invite those folks who have submitted a statement of participation to come forward and speak. Public comment. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, this agenda item provides an open call to the public, allowing individuals to address the governing board on any issue within the jurisdiction of the board. Items not listed on the agenda may be brought to the governing board's attention under this section of the agenda. Due to the Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot discuss or take action on items not listed on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and no more than 30 minutes will be devoted to public comment portion of the agenda. When you approach the podium, please state your name for the record. Our first public participant tonight is Mr. Mike Finnegan.
Hello, everyone. The public school system is in serious trouble. Educators are failing miserably. Kids' academic performance is terrible and has been for many decades. Educators do not know how to fix it. Nothing they have tried has worked. As a result, education at LESD has settled on ways to look good rather than be good. LESD, for instance, LESD is not an A-rated school district as advertised. There is no such rating for any school district in Arizona. Yet we see it all the time in the newspapers, West Valley News. We see it on the LESD website. We see it on the superintendent's messages, letters. We see it on voicemail answering systems, and we see it on email electronic signatures. There is no, according to the US News and World Report, Litchfield schools are named best in the nation. Well, in math, 6,737 students are currently not proficient, while 99% of the principals and 99% of the teachers are evaluated as highly effective. Again, we're looking pretty good, making ourselves look good. It's important to take a baseline measure of a problem before implementing new effects to address that problem. Please do this for this iMath program so that it can be quantitatively evaluated. You need to have a baseline before you implement it. Also, do the same for the 1,500 new Chromebook computers, the SSR funding for 12 math experts, and all these other programs. If you can't measure these programs, you can't manage them. Remember also, Steve Watson says, suspend new initiatives and relax professional development to reduce the teacher stress and burnout of learning new initiatives. But we seem to have glossed over that. Is it true that, okay, I'm going to skip that. I'm going to close with something different. I was at a roundtable discussion yesterday with Congressman Gosar and Carrie Lake and some other Border Patrol people. Fentanyl was the topic. It's plaguing our communities, and it's coming across Arizona's border, which is the main entry point of distribution. One pill can kill.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Finnegan.
My most important part was, we have fire extinguishers on the wall.
I'm sorry.
Do we
your
have
time is up.
Narcan?
I'm sorry, your
Do
time
we
is
have
up.
Narcan available for
I'm sorry,
this
Mr. Finnegan, your
situation?
time is up. Feel free to email the board if you have additional comments. Next up is Cynthia Schwartz.
From reading meeting minutes, it seems like from 2016 to 17, it appears there's a number of programs that LESD has purchased to, 1, increase academic success, 2, reduce discipline issues, and 3, address emotional learning. Specifically, there's a reference to approved character education / social emotional programs list, and I've asked for that list. The bottom line is the district is spending money on programs, and from what I can tell, there is no evaluation, analysis, accountability, or measurement to determine if these programs are producing the results advertised by the vendor. Quickly, we all know about conscious discipline. The district has spent over $270,000 on conscious discipline, which included $5,900 for 2 speakers, including DJ Batiste, a former gang member from LA who found conscious discipline in his senior year of high school. Do we really need to spend $6,000 to hear him speak? And I'll go on and on about conscious discipline. We also have Kagan. The district spent $221,000. Kagan Methods on their website says that they can produce a 32 percentile gain. It says students in the 50th percentile in Kagan now score 82%. Has that happened in LESD? Gold books. We spent $433,000 on gold books. The program is supposed to transform instruction for all students to succeed. The vendor says it will increase 3.4 times growth in reading and 5.6 times growth in math. Did that happen? And then there's Sanford Harmony and Playworks. And I'm sure there's many, many more programs in LSD. My comment is, before you go out and buy another program, identify the root cause, the board and the administration, identify the root cause of any unacceptable academic proficiency in the district. And look at these programs that are advertising the silver bullet. They might just be Band-Aid programs. I think the administration has to show their track record before recommending another program. And I will tell you, I am a senior citizen. I memorized my multiplication tables, and I solved a very complex math problem today without a piece of paper and pencil, and it was division and all of that good stuff. We've had this memorization conversation when my son was in kindergarten. This is not new. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Up next, Ms. Tanya Gehring.
Tanya Gehring. Good evening, President Moran, Governing Board, Superintendent Gunning, LESD, staff, and families. Thank you for the opportunity to speak publicly, and thank you to those who reached out to me after I spoke for the very first time in January. When coworkers and parents reach out with encouragement and thanks, I realized our communities do listen to and care about the board meetings. Tonight, I come to express my concern and confusion over the decision to add another district administrative position while still adding a salary reduction plan to tonight's agenda. Mrs. Osmondson, Ms. McGray, and Maxwell spoke well last month of the growing challenges and responsibilities of teachers and classified instructional staff. They had heartfelt desires to continue to teach and be present for our students. And they also shared the successes and triumphs of those students who are benefiting from dedicated, experienced, and innovative staff. It sounds as if when given the time, our staff and school families excel. Most of our teachers do not need more direction and oversight on how to improve and assess. They don't need another spreadsheet to complete or program to learn. They just need time to shine. The most recent new position is Deputy Superintendent, starting at $115,000. I'm not sure how this position will actually help teachers or why now was a good time to add that position. I just do wonder if we could use money to give teachers more time to complete paperwork and student assessment, time to allow them to make their own conclusions on improving and personalizing their instruction for their students, or how to implement their own fresh ideas to meet their students' developmental needs. Could we have hired more classified staff to be present in the classroom to support teachers and to help students read and solve math problems? Could we have given more than $500 to staff in December for retention bonus? The salary reduction plan includes a possible reduction of up to 5 working days for all administrative, certified, and full-time classified staff. It also includes reducing part-time student transporters by 5 days, and other part-time classified employees could receive up to a 2% reduction in early wages. 5 days may not seem like much to someone who is working 260 days at a rate well above minimum wage. However, 5 days is quite a bit to a staff family member who is working 180 days at minimum wage to help their personal family get by. A school board's job as elected officials is to ensure the district is responsive to the values, beliefs, priorities of their communities, as well as guide the school spending and budget. So tonight I ask that as you move forward making budget decisions, that you look at the total cost of those decisions. Consider the equity, the fairness, the direct financial and emotional impact of your decisions. I ask you to make good and sound decisions on how to support and retain the experience and talented staff of LESD, which is a priority of your community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gehring. I would encourage you to tune in to the study session or attend the study session to be held at the end of this month to hear more of the board's discussion on the budget. As well as I would like to address your concerns on the salary reduction. My understanding, and Superintendent Gunning might want to comment on this, is that that is done as a fallback plan in case of an emergency. We have no intentions on actually implementing that salary reduction plan, but it is something that we discuss and adopt every year. Next up for public comment is Ms. Katie Hill.
Good evening, Madam President and Governing Board. My name is Katie Hill, and I've been a resident, parent, and evidently terrible teacher of the Litchfield Elementary School District for 21 years. I am currently the reading specialist at Litchfield Elementary, where I also oversee math intervention. I have also been the instructional coach, a 3rd grade teacher, and a preschool teacher on this campus. I wanted to speak briefly tonight to you regarding the salary placement chart that you'll be revisiting eventually, maybe in the study session, I'm not sure. You might wonder why an employee of 20+ years would be worried about a placement chart for new hires. Well, that's because it also includes a salary cap for existing employees. I know you might think it's crazy like I do. When I think about a salary cap, I think about Major League Sports, not elementary school teachers. And I can assure you, I don't make anywhere near what a professional sports player is paid. You might also wonder how this salary cap can possibly affect anyone currently employed. Well, it does. It affects many of us. Myself, my husband, we are both educators in this district, and we began our careers here, and we have dedicated our entire careers to this district because we love this community, we love this school, and we love these kids. We could have left over time to higher paying districts. I remember when Dysart was offering a lot more, and we stayed here. We still are. When I reached out to find out about how the salary cap worked, I was told I could move up with more education. Unfortunately, as a dual teacher income family, it also means that our income is very limited, which makes it difficult to attempt to pursue a master's degree when we would never recoup the cost of the student loans that we would both have to then start repaying. My lack of formal education doesn't mean that I'm not actively pursuing new learning all the time. I attend professional development on my own on a regular basis to stay current in best practices in math, reading, and social emotional learning, like many of the educators in this district do. I did notice on the consent agenda that insurance premiums for families with dependents will be going up, and I have a dependent, even though we're both employees. Both mine and my husband's contracts, we have reached the salary cap, so they are the exact same amount as last year. Those contracts, though, we had to sign before we found out about insurance. Not that it would have made a huge difference. I realized that the raise many people got was only $475, which isn't going to cover that insurance probably anyway. I realized I chose this profession, and even though I'm a grandma and you might think I'm retiring soon, I got a long time to go and not make any more money along with my husband. So the main reason I wanted to be here was just put a face to any future decisions that you have to make. There are many of us, and I hope they reach out to you so that you know how many of us there are who started here and are still here. 2 other things I want to address about presentations. I was super excited. Graham Fletcher is doing those videos because he is fantastic when it comes to math. I hope it has an intervention piece, so ask about that. DJ is actually from Louisiana, and my shirt Venom is my son's baseball team, which I have to get outside to right now because this game starts at 7:30. So
Thank you, Ms. Hill. We will be discussing additional budget items, as I previously mentioned, in our study session at the end of this month, as well as historically, we have discussed the salary cap when we discuss the base adjustments to the placement charts, which will happen in April or May. That concludes our community opportunity for comment. Next on our agenda is item 5, which is the consent agenda. I will begin by requesting a few removals from the consent agenda. The first being consent agenda item 6N, additional stipend requests. Item 6O, medical, dental, life, and vision insurance. And item 6T, which is the student handbook for the 2022-23 school year. Do any other board members have requests to pull items from the consent agenda?
Yes. Okay. I've got item 6J, 6Q, and 6S.
Board Member Honak, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I do. I don't want to mess it all up here. So 6R, did somebody already pick that?
No.
Okay. And then, Kim, can you tell me what yours are again? I have 6.
Mine are N, O, and T. Dr. Dowling said J, Q, and S, and you have now requested R.
Yep, that's all. Thank you.
Board Member Clymer or Board Member Zeidema, do you have any additions?
I don't have anything that I want to pull off, but can we have a brief just discussion before you move for motion?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up on item 6, let's see, H, I believe, with our certified resignation. I would just like to ask that on a future agenda study session, not right now today, I don't think this is the appropriate time, to discuss the ability for our HR department to, I don't know, have maybe some different rules around contract release and how appropriate that is in certain situations. I think I would say most of the time it is what it is. They're moving away. They have actually found a better job. I think that having the only criteria be they make more money, after what we just heard from a teacher, I think they would be hard pressed not to find a job that they're going to make more money. So I think that anyone looking for a job is probably not going to make less. And so I think we need to at least just be mindful that leaving a classroom of students in the middle of the year puts everyone at a disadvantage, not just that teacher. So not today, and I will move forward to approve this, but I'd like to at least have a conversation moving forward how we look at this next year.
I believe that is a fair point. Ms. Potapov, can you ensure that that makes it onto the future board agenda items? Thank you. Any other comment on the remaining items on consent agenda? I have one thing I would like to add on item 6L, which is our supplementary contracts wages, AKA stipends. I was super excited to see that we have finally started paying out stipends for our tutors and utilizing some of those ESSER funds to get that program in place. We've been long waiting for that, and I know that's going to make a big impact on our students. So very excited to see that. I will now entertain a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda items. Actually, let me just go ahead and do it. Sorry. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented, minus items J, N, O, Q, R, S, and T.
I second.
Hearing a motion, a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we will address the items removed from the consent agenda. I will start in alphabetical order. Item 6J, which Dr. Dowling requested to remove classified personnel, resignation, termination. Dr. Dowling, you have the floor.
Okay. Going through the list of resignations, people leaving, I noticed that we had one person from the facilities roving grounds maintenance. He'd been here 13 years, should be commended. Romero Gonzalez from Rancho Santa Fe, a retirement out of the front office, it appears. Deborah Badger, 23 years. She should be commended and recognized. And also from Western Sky, I noticed Therese Brannon, instructional assistant, is retiring. Been with us since September of 1999. 23 years. 23 years. That person should be commended. And I'd like to know, without naming names or anything, I'd like to know what she started at, what pay, and where she ended up in 23 years. If that's possible to get that information. Just curious. And that was all I had on that. These people should be commended for being here that period of time. That reflects well upon the what we're doing.
Thank you for your comments, Dr. Dowling. We do generally have a retirement celebration as we get toward the end of the school year. So just to clarify, you don't have any changes or requests for information on that. You just wanted to have some commentary. Okay, great. Then I will entertain a motion to approve item 6J.
I move to approve item 6J, classified personnel resignation termination.
I second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we will address consent agenda item 6N, which is the additional stipend request. My question on this is I would like to hear some additional information about the circumstances that are requiring this additional stipend.
Madam President, members of the governing board, this was a position that was open earlier this year, and I want to say we filled it around the January, February-ish timeframe. We filled it with an external candidate, and unfortunately, due to health concerns, the person had to leave, and we just have been unable to fill that position. So this is additional duties being taken on by a current staff member, so to compensate them for adding additional work. And of course, they're still working to try to fill the position and definitely working to fill it for next year.
Okay, so this position is currently open and we're actively recruiting for this position. We just have not been able to fill it. And so we can't really have that gap. So we're asking an employee to fill that gap. And so we're compensating them for that.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Then I will move to approve consent agenda item 6N as presented.
I second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is consent agenda item 6O, 2022-23 medical, dental, life, and vision insurance. I requested to pull this item for discussion because it will be impact a piece of the puzzle that impacts the entire budget. I personally am not comfortable approving this item as presented, not knowing the rest of the pieces of the puzzle that the board will discuss and determine later in our March study session. But I would be happy to hear any other board member feedback or comments on that.
I would agree with that. I think, one of the pieces that we talked about in our last study session was potentially adding additional benefits to some of our staff members at different hourly levels and things like that. And I think, at least in my mind, we are getting extremely close to having to share more of a portion of the costs with our employees than I think we ever have been before. And so if we're going to be adding additional costs that are not shown here, I feel like you are correct. If I think what you're saying is we're not actually seeing total cost here. And so we're approving something and then we're going to be adding on to it later. So I would agree in support of just tabling it at least for 2 weeks until the end of the month so that we can couple this with any additions that we want to add to the budget to see the total healthcare cost.
I agree, because there's a portion of this, which is going to be the increased portion that we as the employer historically have covered, which is over $200. And that $200 increase isn't going to be an increase to base pay, but will be more of an outlay of cost if we go forward with approving what we have historically approved. So I believe we need to talk about that in conjunction with potential raises at the same time, because this basically is a built-in raise here as well. Any other board member feedback?
I thought we had a cost on the next year's medical. Didn't we have that during the presentation, or maybe?
Yes, and that is in here. Yes, that's in this consent agenda item. If you look in the detail, we have a projected amount, yes. But that's based on, again, us doing what we have historically done, which is cover the entire cost for our employees. We as a board have not been able to discuss if that is in fact what we are going to do, or potentially if and when we will be forced to pass along some of those expenses to our employees. And without that full robust discussion in conjunction with percentage increases and other supports that we would like to provide to our teachers, I think approving this as is presented is premature. I'm not saying we're not going to approve it. I just think it's a premature conversation to have tonight.
I think I agree that we need to see the whole picture. And if we approve this now, it could tie our hands on other decisions we may want to make in our budget. So it's better to have the whole picture in front of us when we're making the decision in the future.
Is the district administration, you've got the time to prepare this as part of, I mean, it's all part of the budget when we go in the study session.
I think Wendy has a talent. She's created that amazing interactive spreadsheet. So when it comes to that time, so if you are plugging in or taking out components, you'll be able to do that. So if there's like, let's just say you wanted to add more instructional aids to the district as a whole, but you wanted to move some additional cost to the employee for their benefits, then that would be something you would be able to see. We will also bring our recommendation too. So we gave you all those options and flexibility for you all to look at, but we'll also bring our formal recommendation at that time as well. But wanted to hear some discussion tonight. I felt it was important to bring it because trying to gauge what direction the board as a whole would like, you know, where you would like to move towards, or if everyone was feeling the same way.
Okay.
I thank you for doing that. I mean, I think this all sort of ladders up to the next several weeks when all of this is going to come down. I think just from my perspective, I think I would like to keep, as we have always done. I mean, I want to pay as much as, if not all, of the health insurance that we can. But what I also want to do is to look at making whole the employees that haven't been for a long time and have been working similar hours and haven't been offered the same health insurance. And in order to do that, if it means that we can only cover 98% of everyone so that everybody is whole, then we need to look at all of that at one time. And so I just want to make sure that we're doing that fairly. And I feel like if we agree to this tonight, we'll have limited opportunity to go back and say, you know, we need to share a little bit of that cost. So I would absolutely, at least for this year, like to see us cover as much, if not all, if we can. I just also want to look at the other options and how that weighs into adding some other employees' opportunities to this spreadsheet.
I agree with Board Member Clymer. I'm not opposed to covering the entire cost. However, we are running a business and we need to look and see how this impacts all of the other pieces of this budget puzzle that we have to put together. This is one piece of total compensation. I don't think that we tout this enough because not every district in our area covers the entire cost of employees' health benefits. And so this $7,100 to $7,300 is a real compensation piece for our employees. And we need to discuss that in great detail and determine how all of those pieces fit together with our limited funding.
That actually is a great point. I don't know if you guys know this or if you could share this with us. The surrounding districts, at least around us, maybe some others in the valley, how many offer 100% coverage of employee benefits? I don't expect you to know this right now, but if there is any numbers associated with that, it might be nice to know, because I think that's a really, hopefully, unique thing that we do that other districts aren't able to offer.
We'd have to go back and look. I know that we looked at it a few years back, but we don't have anything current, so I'm not sure to be able to say competitively what it looks like.
Okay.
And, or even with a portion of dependent coverage, if they have, you know, those types of things, I'm not positive.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then my question is, Potapov, is do we need to, I know I asked you this last time, do we need to move to table, or do we just then ignore this item?
You gotta do something with it. Yeah, it's need to be moved, has to be moved from the consent agenda.
Is our next study session a special meeting, or do we need to move it into the next regular meeting? Okay, then I move to, I don't know that table is the right word, but table agenda item 6O to our April board meeting.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next up is consent agenda item 6Q, Arizona Assessment Collaborative Intergovernmental Agreement.
Yeah,
Dr. Dowling?
yes, I just have a question. We don't have our contribution for this year yet. What has been the average contribution in the last 23 years? Yearly? This is the IGA. I don't. Sign this.
Should have to look that up. She's gonna pull up a past payment. Last year, we spent 2,542.
And that's been about average. So, well, I don't know. But it was
Sure, it's
23
probably
years ago.
similar. I'm
It
sure it
would've
was a little
been
cheaper.
$500. But,
Right.
okay, I just, you're asking us to approve something, I don't have a cost of it. So that's my question.
Yeah, I think it listed in there, it was 20 cents per student. So
20 cents?
yeah, 20 cents per student and a $500 like administration
Okay,
fee.
that's my only question.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve item 6Q, Arizona Assessment Collaborative Intergovernmental Agreement 22 to 26.
I second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is consent agenda item 6R, approval of professional memberships for the 2022-2023 school year. Board Member Honak, you have the floor.
I know you need things but it just seems like, are they serving all of them? Some of them are just on necessity, supervision, curriculum development. So that social, emotional learning.
Well, I think your question earlier actually kind of plays into this. I mean, you asked the presenters for iReady about who else was using the curriculum. And so being involved in an association for curriculum would give us the chance to utilize other people's experiences with those things. That's pretty much what any professional association that you're involved with. That's the purpose, is so you can learn from their experiences and you can share your own experiences. So I think there's some value in that, but we could certainly ask. I see that Dr. Pearson is here and she might have some insight in particular into that particular membership, or Superintendent Gunning might be able to address that as well.
And also maybe just a question of like, there's no list of costs or anything like that, you know?
So a lot of these agencies, like that one that you just mentioned, the ASCD, that is a resource where a lot of times you not only receive books of up-to-date books of research that's happening and occurring in your area. And when it says curriculum, that means the area of curriculum, not specific curriculum itself necessarily. So targeted for leaderships and leadership positions that are in the area curriculum. So it could even be books on data analysis, those types of things, as well as connecting a community of those people that you can talk to, so that if we were in the same role in curriculum, I would have you to bounce ideas off of what things have you done and utilized that have been effective and efficient and have impacted student growth.
So for example, that one, what does that cost? How much is a membership in that?
$59.
Okay, so that's nothing. So unless it's a distraction, then it's a waste of money. But how much are generally the average of, I mean, there's how many of these, 15 or whatever?
Do you know the average? I don't know the average, but they range anywhere from, depending on the number of people, right? So 50 to 120 per person. But not every person is in each, participating in each of those groups.
Okay, well, since I don't know how many people, that doesn't really help me. I mean, are we paying any of these $1,000 or more or not?
If you want cost information, we can bring this back in April with costs. If that's.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see the cost on here. I don't, in the future, be prepared for that question, because I'm going to ask it too. Jeremy, you got me first. I want to see on consent agenda, I want to see a cost on here, or I'm going to pull it, or I'm going to, and someone, who pulled this? That was Jeremy? Good
Yeah,
catch. I missed
did.
it.
But I'll let you pull it if you want.
But if you're looking at the AASA, for example, I don't know how many people they have. That could be $250 a piece or more for the membership. I know I pay about, as a retired, I pay about some ungodly amount, about 400, unless I can get cheaper through here.
And it would just be the
Thanks for
executive
telling me.
directors, yeah. And then the other thing that would be really helpful and is don't hesitate to send those questions ahead of time so that we can have the information readily available for you.
I would agree that at one point the board implemented our kind of standard presentation and the information that we wanted for every decision that was going to be made, such as how it plays into the strategic plan, what the cost of that was going to be. And it does seem like more consistently now, those requirements are falling off of the agenda. So I agree with Board Member Honak and Dr. Dowling that we should not be asked to approve things that have a cost associated with them without being transparent about what that cost is.
And I don't want to make it overly burdensome that we need to know, spend, because then we're going to start discussing a lot, but just some general thing. I mean, you said something very cheap, so.
Agreed. So we will then move to table this item.
I
for
just
the
have one
April-
comment here.
Yes, go ahead, Dr.
Looking at-
Dowling.
Looking at the membership, I don't have any issues whatsoever with the memberships. I just want to make sure if we get into a situation where some budgets have to be cut, these are the areas we would look at. I'm not going to lose a teacher because of these association fees. I'm going to tell you right now. That's the bottom line. If we ever get into that situation, for God's sake, I hope we don't. But that's just a comment.
Thank you, Dr. Dowling. So I will move to table consent agenda item 6R until we have more information at the April board meeting.
I second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is consent agenda item 6S, the fiscal year 2023 salary reduction plan. Dr. Dowling, you have the floor.
Okay, the way I understand this is a plan that we have to be board approved every year. Is this under what statute? I've obviously it's here.
So this is part of our contracts. We have it, since the recession, our attorney had recommended that we have a salary reduction plan in place. And so it's actually in our contracts. And then what this is doing is setting the revenue level, that if we go below that level, then we would be able to start implementing the furlough days, any number of days to each group. It wouldn't have to be consistent. You could hit one group for 5 days before you hit any other. It's just part of the contract.
Okay, just contract language. I remember this. Have we ever had to pull the plug on this? Ever
So
had to use
once
it?
the budget was actually completely approved, no. I believe we had 1 year where we had 1 furlough day for 12-month employees, but that was determined on their work calendar, not from this furlough plan.
Okay,
So no, we have not actually gone back and implemented it.
so that was on 12-month employees only, apparently.
Yes. From what I remember, that was a long time ago, but
Okay, then you answered my question. We really haven't had a need to implement this.
no.
Okay, that was my question.
Thank you, Dr. Dowling. I hope that puts our employees' minds at ease to have more information on this particular item. I will move to approve consent agenda item 6S as presented.
I second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next and final item on our consent agenda is item 6T, student handbook for the 2022-23 school year. I requested to remove this from the consent agenda because I would like to discuss one particular change to the student handbook, which has to do with transportation. As a board, this year, we approved a temporary change to the transportation boundary that students who are at 2 miles from each school would not be provided transportation. Our standard in the past has been a 1 mile radius. I would like for the student handbook to be printed with our standard 1 mile for transportation, and I would like to be able to say that our parents and families can rely on that. And that is how we are intending to start out the school year. I understand due to COVID, we have obviously experienced many issues in our transportation. However, we as a board have tried to mitigate those in the best way possible. So I personally do not feel comfortable or do not support starting off as we do not intend to go. My intention would be, and my hope would be, that we'll be back to servicing all of our students as we have historically at 1 mile and further from each school. But I would like to hear any additional board member feedback on that.
I 100% agree with President Moran about this. This has been obviously something that's been really hard for me every time we've had to talk about it. And the idea of us possibly having to talk about it again is causing me some stress. However, I agree that we should go at it with, this is our plan. And if we have to make a change, then we have to make a change. But right now, we are doing everything we can to make our plan, the way we like to do things at 1 mile, happen for our students for next year. So I 100% support that.
Any other board member comments or any other comments on any other areas? Obviously, the new dress code, which we already approved, will be implemented in the handbook first draft for next year as well.
I am in support of what both of you were saying in terms of transportation. I think, we've definitely had some setbacks that some were foreseen, some were not this year, and we've had to make some tough decisions. And I know a lot of families have really been, had some difficult times because of that. So I agree with the idea of let's start how we intend to finish. And that is, going back to our original thing. So I'm in support of that. The good news is we at least have through the summer to make, whatever adjustments we can, if possible. I did have one question on the dress code. So is the dress code changing for starting today, or is this only for the student handbook for next year?
This is the 22-23 handbook.
Okay, so the dress code, how we approved it before is current now.
Right.
And then once we start next year, it'll change a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. And then I would recommend taking the line out in regards to the transportation and the 2 miles, because our current policy is not that. And then that allows us time to change policy first before having something in a handbook that potentially may not be changed. And then we could have some miscommunication to families. So
that makes sense to me.
Well, but why wouldn't we, our current policy as it stands without the exception is 1 mile, yes or no?
we made the adjustment to the policy for 2 miles, I believe is what you did previously. And so we would need to bring that policy back for 2 readings to change it.
Okay, so that can't be just like a temporary from this date to this date. This is the policy. It has to come back for a reading.
There isn't a date on a policy.
Okay.
So it's not like for a duration.
Okay.
But the conversation was as soon as we were able and ready, because we didn't know the time frame, and we're hoping that we were going to be able to do it a lot quicker. Still very hopeful, but we've just implemented the contracted supports and still in the process of hiring for the student transporters.
So is it possible to just update the transportation information in the handbook, but not put 2 miles and just have them link to the policy? So once the policy is updated, it goes directly from the handbook to the policy. So it's at least as accurate as the policy is. Does that make sense?
Right, like to refer them for that
Right.
component, I would think. I don't know.
I mean, it seems like we're going to have to update one or
Right.
both anyway. So just the least amount of sort of paperwork updating. If I know we have to update the policy, so then it would automatically update this document without having to bring it back and you guys having to do the extra work. But
Okay, then could we also ensure that we are allowing adequate time to make that decision before the start of the next school year? So can we make sure that's on the June regular meeting to have the first reading of the revision back to the 1 mile policy?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Based upon,
Or May, whatever.
she has it in the plan for May,
Okay.
actually, for first read and then
Perfect.
June. Right.
Perfect.
Unless we had any other major, but we could still bring it back to be able to talk about if there was major concerns. And I would just say, just delete that line out where we are. And the only reason is just looking at, remember when we had that feedback in regards to our website and links and those components. So the more links and things that you add, then the more we're trying to limit that part so that we are more ADA compliant. So I would say just delete it, and that is a detail that's not there, and they're only referring to policy or the website under transportation.
okay.
Okay, then I will move to approve consent agenda item 6T, student handbook for the 2022-2023 school year, as presented with deleting the bullet point updated transportation to provide transportation to students that live 2 or more miles from school.
I second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is item 7A, consideration and approval of recommended K-8 math curriculum, iReady classroom mathematics adoption. Executive Director DeCoste, the floor is yours.
You've seen the presentation and asked many questions. If you have any more questions to ask or any other concerns, I'm happy to address them now. And I think we have one member of our committee left.
I'm unclear on the cost, though.
So the cost will be approximately 1.2 million. This is in the governor's grant, but I think we're also allotting some room in capital in case of failure of the governor's grant. So what we wouldn't move through with procurement until we had board approval for adoption. So we can't buy it without your permission, basically. So
Okay.
And we say, is it, you said that you're not going to include the traditional academy students in that. So how many students, the 1.2 million is how many students approximately, like 1,000 or?
it would be approximately 10,000. I mean, just minus.
10,000.
Yeah, approximate, yes. Including some of our self-contained special education classes also, and our resource teachers and ELL. So we're working, well, Dr. Pearson is working her magic to get smaller sets for our teachers that teach smaller groups.
And is the 1.2 million, is that for the 3-year period or is that per year?
That's for the 3-year period. And again, that's approximate. We will bring that back to you. Roger Spivey will bring back that information to you at another date for approval.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're just getting some rough ideas. So,
Sure.
So, but as it stands right now, does that include training and all that?
Yes,
sort
that
of support and
includes
everything?
the books for, the teacher editions for all the teachers, the student workbooks, the online access for all of the parents, and all the professional development that she talked about, that Susie talked about tonight.
Okay. And I think of one questions right now.
Okay, I got a question. Approximately, we think, 1.2 million, or do we know, out of the governor's grant? You said 1.2 million out of the governor's grant.
Yes, well, we wrote $1 million into the governor's grant.
And there was a capital expenditure, obviously, for the books.
Yes.
And how much is that?
Do you want?
We don't know.
Yeah, so the governor's grant includes the curricular and the PD piece, and then the curricular and the online, the PD would come from Indian Gaming.
Indian game, okay.
Okay.
And you mentioned the capital expenditure.
Well, because curriculum is always in Dr. Pearson's capital budget.
Okay. And then my other question is, I think I forgot my other question.
You can come back to it.
The training is good for 3 years. In other words, this cost includes 3 years of training. Yeah.
I'm going to let Dr. Pearson talk about that, because
Yeah, that
she's
was a
working
little
very
bit-
closely with them and planning out the
Too good of a
PD
deal to me.
for.
So what Susie talked about was those 3 touch points in the initial year, the 3 touch points in the second year, and then the third year, we would probably look at probably two touch points, and they would look probably a little different. So the professional development costs, I think, of the third year, and sometimes it depends on how many days you use up. So we try to combine campuses or take advantage of other scenarios to utilize less days so we can spread them out over the 2 years.
In the training, you're saying they're going to bring their people in, or is this not us training the
Yes.
trainer?
Correct.
I hope not.
So what we looked at is for this year, that initial training of showing the teachers, that is their trainers coming out, as well as the pre-service before school, the trainers coming out,
Okay.
and then as well the days built in. Some of that is a combination of walking through classrooms as well as working with teachers, and then a leadership training as well too in July.
Okay. And it looks like we had, we piloted both of these programs that we were looking at, correct?
Correct. The teachers field tested both programs.
And what was were they side by side in different classrooms or were they, or what?
It was within the same classroom. So the teachers piloted one program first and then began the second program. First was Reveal, the first program we looked at. The second program was iReady. So the same teacher field tested both programs with her students to really be able to.
Well, that's really confusing to the kids, is it not? I mean, we've got our program. We got two new ones coming in.
I would say probably the teacher that we have here could speak to that, but that was not feedback from any of the teachers that shared in our committee meetings as we debriefed.
Pick up exactly where they left on.
We aligned the units and we asked the vendors to provide us the units that aligned with the curriculum
That's all you have to say.
scope and sequence.
I have one other SPED classrooms would be impacted by this.
Will be what? I'm sorry.
Will SPED classrooms be part of this math curriculum?
Yes, and actually I met with Melissa and Amber today, and we looked through especially the below grade level components and that diagnostic component and building a classroom for our special ed teachers that have their caseload students and being able to target specifically their IEP goals and having those resources, as well as just other skill deficits of students on their caseload. So absolutely that teacher toolkit that he went through is going to be, I think, a big component that they utilize.
Can we use SPED funds, grants to sustain the program for those kids who were impacted by this program? Let's say it's 10%. I heard that about 20% of our students are being serviced under Title II, is that correct? I heard that somewhere, 2,000 students. It sounds awful high, but my question would be, can we use any SPED grants to sustain the program in the future based on the number of SPED students that are being impacted by it?
Well, this would be our elementary K5 that would be using.
So we could look at that in the grants, but generally we have used our capital funds to provide the same or similar curriculum for our special ed. So we use that as part of our capital as opposed to pushing it into a grant.
I'm just looking at the 1.2 governor's grant that we have is going to go away. And if we want to sustain the program in the future, I'm looking at down the road. It's sustainability. That's what I want to see. If this program works for us, and we get the results and it's measured correctly, this is where we want to be, and it's measured correctly, we want to continue with it.
Correct.
And we got to look at all sources because you're going to lose these grants.
Right.
Particularly the governor's grant.
And that's why in our capital fund, you'll see we do have a pretty hefty carryover, and that's the purpose, is to ensure that we can continue curriculum and what we need.
All right. That's my question.
I got a couple more,
Yeah,
if it's okay. I did my caveman math, and it comes up to $40 per student per year is what I think it ends up to. You take the 1.2 million, 10,000, whatever, which seems, reasonable. It's not a lot. So this company, how many schools total in the nation do they? I'm just wondering how big this is. This thing, how much it's used.
I don't have that information. I'm sure we could email them and find out.
Well, are they just local Phoenix based?
No, they're national.
They're national. Okay, so so that answers my question.
Yeah.
Okay,
And we sat even, the trainers as well too, and some of the PD that they did and seeing in classrooms across the country.
Yeah, okay, I get it. That's good enough for me. And then, and so it's going to be kind of an all eggs in one basket. Like we adopt this program, and that's pretty much going to be the bulk of our math curriculum.
The core instruction for K-8, yes, this would be the curriculum and using that with Fidelity.
Okay, and then what is the program? And I probably should know the answer to this, but what are we using right now, and what does it cost?
Currently, we have Engage New York, which is when it was originally, I guess, adopted or implemented, I should say, was an initial cost with manipulatives I believe, and more running like copies. It was something that was like open source, if you will. So making those changes, I know we did some work to, this was just before my time, but did some work to revise some of those, but there was an initial printing cost and training and such, but I don't have the actual cost of
But it
what
was
that
kind of
program
minor
was.
cost, is what you're saying.
Mm.
Yeah, okay. And what was the name of that? What is the name of that?
So Engage New York, also called Eureka Math.
Say it again.
Engage New York, Eureka
Okay.
Math.
All right.
Is now, it's Great Minds that is the publisher now. So I could go back and give you the history of that open source and how that changed hand and the publisher now.
Right.
We did not move to that, what is called the publisher, the paid version, if you will. We did utilize Eureka Math in Sync during the closure because it did provide a digital component. It was a very heavy lift because it's not a digital platform or curriculum, hard to teach online. So we did utilize that online piece during online instruction.
So if they are a lot of schools, let's just say many, is there enough data to show that how this is better than other programs, or because that's something that seemed to be kind of missing. It seemed like they had some in the, maybe I missed it, but it seemed like they had anecdotal.
I think they touched on it when he talked about the ESSA rating and as well as kind of the research. And I know Mrs. DeCoste looking at districts and high performing districts across the nation, and Ed Reports, which is a national bank of looking at highly rated, actually they rate all curriculum and they give you an indication of how that curriculum performs in different areas. And this is, they give you a score, they give the curriculum a score in different areas. And so if it's green lighted or gets that high rating in all areas, then that's a really good measure as far as how that curriculum performs across the nation.
Yeah,
so I know that was something he referenced.
And I get the feeling that in high performing districts, it might work, very well. My concern is that what if it is, and I'm sounding very negative on this, but I'm not, okay, but I just want to make sure what we're doing is optimal, because we're not great performing overall. And so, I really believe I'm opposed to equity the way it is, but actually my actions are more oriented towards equity, because I sincerely believe that if you can grab on to the worst sector, the lowest performing sector, and you can elevate them, everything is going to move. It's just going to slide the whole scale up. I'm convinced of that. I just believe that. And so that I'm really concerned about. How is it going to work? That's why I was a little bothered with the parental thing that looked like it was really complicated. And the parents of the lower achieving students are just going to look at that and, I mean,
I think looking at it from a couple of different angles, initially looking at that, what do we expect to see in every math classroom? What are practices that, regardless of program, are important instructional components in a math classroom, and a program and curriculum that supports that type of instruction for math? So getting that conceptual understanding so that math reasoning and doing that math, holding those numbers in your heads, all those things you talked about, is developed over time, and students are successful in mathematics, and giving teachers the tools of how to systematically do that is really important. And that's a key component to the curriculum, as well as what we're addressing is some of that unfinished learning and giving the teachers tools, the digital combined with the instruction in those small groups, to do both. It's not easy to do. And we want to make sure the teachers have tools that are easy to use. And I'm not sure how much parent component in there, but looking at those reports and being on there, I don't have a concern. Miss Acosta at Barbara Roby, her field test teachers did a really great job with really diving into this curriculum, and I'm sure they could speak to the parent component. And they were really excited about potentially using this program next year if adopted. So I feel like between our staff and working with parents to utilize those pieces, I do feel that can be a really powerful.
In your selection process, did you even consider Khan Academy, which I understand it now has a lot of really strong teacher tools and school-oriented tools, not just for individuals. I mean, was it even a contender or, and you can give me the short answer if you want.
Khan Academy was not a program that was
It's not
evaluated
what?
or brought up. It was not a program that was evaluated or brought up from the committee as a program that they were interested in looking at.
Great resource and a great supplement for teachers. But as far as a curriculum for K-8 in the classroom for a core math curriculum, it's not.
Thank you, Board Member Honak. Do any other board members have questions?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to reiterate what was said earlier, that I really appreciate the teachers and everybody that put the time in to look into these different programs. When we were adopting our reading curriculum before, there was some confusion when we were trying to go through that process of, it seemed like what staff wanted versus what was being presented maybe didn't match. And so I like that we've fine-tuned the way we did that and had you guys test both the programs so that we could get a more honest opinion, because you saw both. So then you could say which one you like better versus when you had one and you really liked this one, but you don't know what the other one was really like. So I think that was a great change to how we did this process. So I appreciate you guys taking the time, putting that into it. I think this is going to be a great resource for our students that are behind and our students that are higher, because teachers are going to be able to push our kids further that are already advanced and can go further in their skills, and then also be able to reach those kids that are behind and going to see quickly where those gaps are. So I really appreciate that this program is going to give that resource to our teachers to see right away. So I love this idea of doing this program.
I'd like to just make one comment. It's not really a question, but I know the board has talked over the last couple of months about evaluating our systems and really sort of coming up with a scorecard or a rubric, I'm not sure the right word, to really be able to address sort of all of our internal systems and when they're evaluated and how they're evaluated. So this looks like a great program, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And I think this is just another sort of system, if you will, that we need to sort of put into that category and say, okay, 2-3 years from now, I mean, I don't think a year is going to give us enough data to really understand that, but not only how are our kids doing, right? Obviously the academic success, but actually going back to the teachers and seeing how they're doing, what's working, what's not working, that kind of thing, to really truly evaluate it, and what are parents telling them, you know, all of that kind of thing. So I'd like to at least just think about building that into how we, you know, how you guys will evaluate it moving forward, and after the 2 or 3 year mark, what happens from there, you know, kind of the same way that we have done with Wonders up to this point through the implementation.
Absolutely. And that's something we're already looking at building into next year, of those, you know, focus groups, maybe those that are still willing from the committee or some others to do those checkpoints to see what things are working.
Well, I think that's a good point. You could actually, if you do it during the 3 year period, you have the support of the iReady staff to, I mean, anything that you need to address right away, that's great from the technical side. But you can also say internally, this is really working for us, or we can tweak things or not. But just having that evaluation structure built in, and also sort of making that a transparent process. I know one of our community members during public comment sort of talked about that evaluation of programs and initiatives. And I think that's a great way to help the community understand how we make decisions and how we proceed with things moving forward. So thank you.
I just have one more. I mean, is there any expectation of what we expect to achieve if we adopt this? I mean, is anybody saying that we're going to improve math by this much or whatever? Is there any benchmark or anything at all, or any guesstimate or anything at all? Any benchmark? Yeah, I guess that drives a lot of things. So, you know, barring something else, we have AZ merit. Yeah, why wouldn't we expect?
Well, I believe the goal on the learning recovery was specific to, we said, all students proficient by, was it 2023 or 2024? And this is a tool that we are implementing to help aid that recovery. So would that answer your question, Board Member Honak?
That wouldn't, because it isn't,
That wouldn't.
that's another goal. And that's a goal we made, you know, and it's a good goal. And we made it without even discussing this math program in particular. So my question is, are we, I mean, they seem like they have a lot of expertise, this company, you know, they can get an overall picture of what, and I would, if I were going to be getting it, I would be expecting them to, you know, pretty much promise that it would be able to do
Well, again,
reach
that's
a
where
certain level.
that's where the
And if
implementation
not,
piece
then-
is pretty
then
critical.
what-
Go ahead, Superintendent Gunning.
I was gonna say, I think there are a couple of things that we'll be looking at. One, we'll be monitoring in our own benchmarks. Can we maintain or exceed 1 year's growth in our students and make up? The other thing is to remember that we have a new test coming out, a new state assessment. Now, it's supposed to be aligned, but we know it's a whole new vendor. So that's going to set a whole new state assessment kind of guideline for us. So then we'll have to see where we're really sitting, because we don't know when. So I always say when the target changes, you have to adjust.
Well,
So-
I agree.
so
I
they-
mean, I
so-
agree. I mean, to be reasonable, yes,
Right,
we would have to take
right.
into account this. We have another epidemic. We have a nuclear war, which we might be having.
So I think
you know,
those will be the
whatever.
things.
Yeah, but I
that-
mean, but to sit and say, well, we're not going to have anything at all is, you know.
Actually, I think it's going to be even more powerful having a newer assessment, because now we'll have an assessment with previous curriculum, right? And then we'll really get to see the impact next year, because this will be implemented next year, of that first year of implementation and the impact that we're seeing on student growth, but with our own benchmarks, and the impact that we're seeing on the state achievement levels as well.
Well, I guess I'm completely, I don't want to be opposed to it. I want us to get solutions, but just being a logical person, there's no benchmark and there's no data showing how this performs in a large scale. And we're sitting here buying something that's $1.2 million, but more importantly than that, it's 10,000 kids. You know, their success is going to be depending on it. And we're supposed to be adults here making a choice, and we're not looking at it to say, does it even work? Is it a slick sales program, and anybody can manipulate data and stuff like that. So I'm not hearing the kind of answers that are convincing me. I'm sure we're going to vote whatever way anyway, but I have an obligation.
I think we saw some data to see with other districts that have used it over time. So I think working with iReady and looking at what is expected in first year, what's expected in second year, and seeing what that typical growth looks like, and then setting our own measures based on where our students are. And by grade level, looking at what would we expect to see in that diagnostic assessment of growth of all students. That diagnostic gives a starting point, which is going to be different for all students, but that trajectory for students, if they start, you know, at this level, what's expected growth? So that may look different for each student, but we can assess and see where if they're keeping pace on their own trajectory. And I think that's a really powerful tool. So working with iReady to set that by grade level based on our initial diagnostic data would help set that.
Well, we're doing that after we're purchasing it. You know, if you just set a goal, even if you don't make the goal, it doesn't mean it's a failure or whatever, but at least you have something to say it didn't meet our expectation, but yeah, we think it's working or it's better. But right now there's none. And I think this district has just poured money into stuff that supposedly was, you know, supposed to have great results. And in some cases, I'm pretty sure they have negative results. And because nobody really went and asked the hard question and somebody to put their word behind it or some kind of a promise or whatever. You know, maybe this company that for the 3-year contract, you know, they don't get, you know, 10 or 20% of the money unless something happens. You know what I mean? That would performance thing, something or other. They probably, I guarantee I could talk to them in 5 minutes. They'd agree to something if that was the deciding factor. And that's, and you know, because they want to make the sale, you know, and even if they're risking something. But right now we're not we have no, we could be sitting here 3 years from now with worse scores and nobody paying attention, because that historically, that seems to be what's going on at LASD.
Thank you.
In many cases.
Thank you for your feedback, Board Member Honak. I would like to say that I am not a curriculum expert. However, I did go in and examine both of these curriculums that were available for public viewing, as well as did online research with some of the independent entities that have evaluated these. And to reiterate what Board Member Zeidema said about the process that we went through in approving or in recommending iReady for approval, I am very pleased that the committee, the results were overwhelming toward iReady to show that that clearly was the favorite and would be the better of the two options. That, again, both of these curriculum are used nationally at many schools throughout the country. So I know both of the companies who publish these and support these are well known and have been around for many years and have a proven track record. So I am willing to move forward with this company knowing history, as well as the recommendation of the adoption committee and their experience and what they have put forward with the work that went into this particular recommendation. As such, I would like to move that we approve the recommended K-8 math curriculum iReady adoption as proposed.
I second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Next, we will move on to agenda item 7B, reopening mitigation plan revisions, presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, I think this will be a quick, easy one. This is modifying our reopening plan and mitigation strategies to follow along with CDC guidance, which we have done the entire time through the pandemic. So this is making the adjustments since our state is no longer considered in a high risk area, that we remove the mask requirement and that masks are optional on both the bus and in schools, and that's for children and for adults. This falls also in line with this change from the federal guidelines in regards to the wearing of masks on bus. So.
Any questions or comments from board members on the proposed change?
I do not have a question, but I would like to say that I am proud of our board and the fact that we have stuck to what we said and sticking to CDC guidelines throughout this process. It's definitely been challenging. Every school district everywhere across the country has had to make some very hard decisions, and we are definitely no exception. I support this thing that we're putting forward. I appreciate this, but I also want to thank our staff who have been role models for our students while we've had our mask mandate in place, being visual to them of what we were hoping for them to do and making it easier for the kids to follow along, showing proper mask wearing. I know that it was a difficult thing that we've asked people to do for a very long time, but I think it's really important that we continue to be role models for our students. So I appreciate all of our staff members who were that role model for our kids throughout this entire process.
If there's no further discussion, I will entertain a motion.
I will make a motion, but I do want to say first that can we just recognize this might be like, I don't know, I just feel like this is a monumental step forward. We've been doing this for 2 years, and the battling and the are we wearing them, are we not wearing them, do kids want to wear them, do we have an opt-out form? It's been a long road, and Melissa, I will echo what you said in the sense of, we have tried our very best to stick to the CDC guidelines, our state guidelines, and I appreciate all the resources that the administrators brought to us in terms of helping us navigate that. So I feel as if this is monumental, and as soon as we do this, we should just rip our masks off. I move to approve the reopening mitigation plan revisions as presented.
I second.
Having a motion in a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Board Member Clymer, feel free to take your mask off. I have a bit of a cough, so I'm going to keep mine on. Next on our agenda is item 7C, year ended June 30th, 2021, audit reports presented by Executive Director Qualls.
Thank you, President Moran. Our auditor did present the reports earlier to you. I'm happy to answer any additional questions. What we're asking for tonight is just to accept the reports. There is a new requirement that it has to be done by a roll call.
Okay, do any board members have questions on the audit reports?
Once again, no questions, but kudos to Wendy and her whole team for once again, clean audit report. No issues whatsoever because we have amazing staff that stay on top of all of it. And so I just, as a board member, as a community member, all of it, appreciate the hard work that you put in every day to make sure that we are staying all together the way we need to be. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got one question. On the letter from the accounting firm, on page 2 of the letter, I just need clarification, almost at the bottom, under uncorrected misstatements. The bullet point in which indicates that the liability for premiums overstated by $372,000, the net position is understated by the same amount. So the net position is overstated by $77,357. You're understated and you're overstated, but it's the same amount. It doesn't make sense. And then it says that we overstated by 77. If you subtract the two amounts, it's zero. The overstatement, the understatement. Does anybody see that? No, it's not a big deal or what? I just need clarification. Yeah, I don't understand.
So I think the difference is that they're looking first at just the overall over and understatement, but then they're looking at current year, the change in current year. So we amortize based on straight line basis, and the requirement is to do it on the effective interest rate. So there would be a difference each year, but how it's recorded in the financial statements, it's a plus and a minus. It shows like a debit and a credit. So
doesn't make sense. The
That's
overstatement and the understatement are identical.
Well, that's called
And
double
how do you have a
entry.
difference of 77,000? We have an accountant right now.
Yeah, that's called double entry accounting. That is how it works. Whether it makes sense or not, that's how it works.
But that amount, that 77,000 sounds awful familiar with the ADM audit we had.
oh, it has nothing to do with that. Nothing to
But
do
when I
with
saw
that.
that amount, it was about, I think it was 75 on the ADM, and 77 here. I go, what is that?
No, and I had asked him, this is the first year that we had that in our financials, so I asked him about it, and he said it was a change and that all districts do it by straight line. And so this ends up in all of the district reports.
And in addition, the auditor did mention that this was an immaterial item. So that should give you some assurance as
I
well.
just looked at the numbers. I don't.
Good question. I'm glad you actually read it. That's great. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to approve, and then we will go through a roll call vote.
Okay. I will move to approve the year-end audit for June 30th, 2021 as presented.
I second.
Having a first and a second, each board member needs to state their name and how they vote, yay, nay, or abstain. Board Member Honak.
Jeremy Honak. I'm abstaining because, to be honest, I did not read it. I don't have no reason to believe that it's not correct. But I don't think I have the privilege of voting for it.
Thank you. Board Member Clymer.
Danielle Clymer, yay.
Dennis Dowling, yet.
Melissa Zeidema, yay.
Kimberly Moran, yay. Motion carries. Next on our agenda is item 7D, approve staffing and class sizes for 2022-2023. Again, this is presented by Executive Director Balls.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning. So I have the information for you. If we had taken our 100th day student counts, roll those up to the next grade level and adjust staffing based on that, using our current average targeted class size. And that is what I have presented for you tonight. I know at our last meeting, there was discussion of maybe we want to talk about changing those class sizes. So I wanted to present this to you tonight so we could discuss it, look at a little bit at the cost if we were to change it. But if we could have any discussion you'd like to have on this.
Is there board member feedback on class sizes?
Yes, I might not have been the only one, but I know that I did request to sort of have this conversation. So my request to have this conversation wasn't necessarily to say, you know, I want to reduce it by 1, 2, 3 students specifically. What I wanted to at least have a conversation about was, you know, we have these enrollment reports, and I think next we're going to talk about excess capacity, and I think these kind of go hand in hand, is that there are schools and grades that are just consistently over our own numbers. And I've never understood this, but I just know this is how it's always been, that, you know, we have district approved class sizes. And then we say, but we won't actually do anything about it until we won't address the problem until we're at least 3 kids over that number. So it's not actually that number, it's 3 kids over that number. And it's in every single class, not just one. So I'm wondering if you can just give me a brief explanation of like where we sit today. I've gone through each of these numbers, and there's, you know, more than a handful of grades and classes that are, I would say significantly, but let's just say they're over consistently. And I don't want to reduce the number of kids in every class. I just want to do what we said we were going to do. And I feel like we're not doing that. And I just need some help understanding how we're utilizing the regulation. And when, I know we've had this conversation over and over, but I just want to have it again so the board can hear, and we have different board members. So I just want to have it again.
So in the policy, we have the average target sizes. And so we monitor those throughout the year. And when they get to 2 over on average per class, we start to look at, do we think we'll add an instructional coach, or sorry, not instructional, instructional aid or a teacher. We talk with the principal, decide if there's additional growth going on, and then add those positions. There are schools that are consistently high, and the reason we don't add teachers to those is they're out of classrooms. So on the west side is where the majority of those are, and we don't have enough classrooms. As we've reduced class size, we've already spread out a little bit, so you don't have more room to spread out.
Then I think we need to discuss different options. I think if we have a rule that says, or a policy that says we have target class sizes, and because of that, we've outgrown the space, then we need to modify the space. Right? I mean, we need to add temporary classrooms. Dan, please don't freak out on me back there. We need to do something else, because we're consistently, like you said, you know, on the west side of our district where the majority of growth is, and will continue to be over time. We have to address that. I mean, we can't just say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. There are things we can do about it. And we have the money to do it. So when we're being asked to approve class sizes and open enrollment where, you know, there are places here where it says, yes, we have capacity, and yet every classroom is over our target class size. How can we have excess capacity when we're already over our class sizes? So that's the next item, so we'll talk about that. But anyway, I just wanted to put it out there in the board, because I don't want to change our policy, but I do want to demand that we at least follow our own regulation. And I feel like we're not doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things, obviously building new classrooms is a very expensive proposition. But an option to that might be, rather than saying when we get 2 over in every class, we say when we get 1 over in every class, then we add an instructional aid, instructional assistant, or then maybe when we're at 2, we do something else, and actually being consistent on that policy. I know as well, in the past, we've been told certain principals don't like having instructional aides, or don't like, certain teachers don't like having that. And so, we've given them a lot of autonomy. And by doing that, we may or may not actually be getting the same quality of classroom instruction as we might expect. So that would be something as a board, if we wanted to tighten up those, again, regulations, it's not a policy, but it's a regulation, then we should discuss that.
If I
Go ahead,
could
Mr.
comment.
Ryan.
Yeah, I think that's, I agree with you, Daniel, in the sense, but then on the other side of it is you got the reality, and I think actually it's probably being handled with supreme expertise by the people sitting over here, the administration, because there is the reality of, you've got more students, going to certain schools and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be something that you balance and live with, in the way it is working, probably having the input of the principal and stuff like that. I think it's just reality, and I grew up in schools that were growing like crazy, and there was like tons of kids in classes and weird stuff all over. We all survived, We had desks to climb under when there was, threat of nuclear war. So we survived. So I think they're doing a good job.
Thank you. And we also did hire a demographer, and so we'll be bringing information to you regarding that too, which will have several years projections out. So we can have discussions about boundary revisions or things like that to help ease the west side.
I think that every year when you open your doors, there's going to be kids coming in. And as you get closer to their 100th day, there's going to be kids going out. So when you look at that, and the only way to address the capacity you have, once you set your boundaries and you set your class sizes, et cetera, you'll be looking at the B word, boundaries, every year. And then you're going to have, you think you got all the people in here, you're going to have 10 times what your worst nightmare was. And you'll be doing this every year. Your classroom sizes at the beginning of the year, you won't be able to find chairs or desks for them. I've gone through it on the west side of town. So, and now we're going through another cycle. It's like we did back in 2003, 2004, 2005, when we had 45 kids in the US history class. We've got to work through it. I'm more concerned about hiring teachers once we identify the fact that we are, if we say 8th grade is 32 students, which is, I think is high, but 32, then you've got on the average 8th grade across the board, you've got 8th grade period. You've got 35 kids, you got to hire another teacher. Then you got to go through the hiring process. And how long is that going to take if you're looking for a math teacher who there aren't any out there right now? So we just got to get through this the best we can with the class size. It is what it is. Is it going to change, be higher in some schools? Unfortunately, it will be.
I think that would be great if we actually were hiring additional teachers, but that's not what's happening. If we had 5 open positions right now that we couldn't fill, I would not be having this conversation. I get it. I get the reality. The problem is that we don't have 5 open positions because we're not addressing it. So we're just getting through it by just basically disregarding our own regulation. That's the problem that I have. If we're just going to say it is what it is and they're doing a great job, then why have the regulation at all? We're not following our own rules. That's what's upsetting to me, is that we're telling teachers who have 35 kids in their class, well, the rule is 32, and when you get 3 more, we'll give you help. And then, oh, but you're at 35, but we're not actually doing that. So I don't think us as a body up here are being true to ourselves. And we said this is what we should be doing as a district. Everyone agreed. And that it's hard and we can't do it. If that was anything else, we would not allow that.
We have hired teachers this year due to class size. Just want to make sure everybody knows that. Wendy monitors it very closely, and as soon as it's ready, one for popping an instructional aid, and then second for the teacher, that's added immediately. And we've done it, I think several times at Verado L this year because of the amount of growth. Where there could be concern is in those campuses that are already pretty full and at capacity, and you can't turn children away when they live within the boundaries of that district. The other part that's been a struggle, I would say at both of those campuses as well, is that people want to come and work at a place that their child can go to school. So we actually turned away at one of those campuses quite a few internal employees' children, unless you had to work there. So you had to physically work at that campus to be able to get your child in. And so we have been very strict on those campuses and have been opening up positions based on class sizes throughout the year. So that's something that we have worked on. I don't think it will ever be a perfect system unless we had the exact same growth and the exact same setting across. I mean, as soon as the building is complete, then you'll see the district stabilize. And actually what you'll see with the demographers data is our student population will climb for a couple of years, and then it's going to start to decline. So trying to plan and strategize for that as well. But I do want to say that that's something that, I mean, she monitors those class sizes very, very closely and usually beats the principal to the punch on calling and to say, hey, I've noticed your class sizes. And
right, but on the schools that we don't
space?
have space, we're not hiring. I mean, you can see here, Belen Soto, I mean, they have multiple grades that they're over. I mean, if we have open positions, I haven't seen them. And where are you, to your point, where are you going to put them?
We did actually move a classroom at Belen Soto to create space. So we're utilizing every nook and cranny, and actually
yeah, absolutely.
Dan just completed, we made some structural changes within our media center to be able to add another classroom there as well. So it's not something, I just don't want people to think out there that we're not addressing it and that we're just not doing anything. I will say the questions have come up in Superintendent's Advisory Council because a lot of staff members do not know that you have to accept the children within your district. They thought we could just turn people away, and that is not the case. So
sure, I'm not advocating that we turn anyone away. I mean, we want all the children that live in our district, and we offer space to those that don't. Again, I think this just goes back to doing everything that we can. And I think sometimes we just say, well, we don't have space, we're just going to deal with what we have. And I do think, I mean, it sounds like, making new space, doing that, those things are happening, but this is a problem every single year. I mean, we're lucky that we have more kids than we have space right now. I think it's something important to discuss because I do think that this is an area that we're not living up to our own guidelines. We're not living up to our own rules. So
I think that one of the things in watching how we've done this process with boundary changes, I know who brought up boundary changes and how nobody likes that. And I haven't been on the board when we've had to do it, but I have watched it happen and I understand how ugly it can get. But I think that the board and the district really tried to make sure kids aligned, same elementary school, same middle school, same high school. And in doing that, we opened up Belen Soto at capacity, whereas Scott Libby was not. Like they had hardly any students. So there is room to move stuff around to where that's not the case. And I know that nobody wants to hear that. And people don't want to drive by a school. I live in an area where I have to drive by 2 schools to take my kid to her elementary school, but that's the right thing to do because that's proportioning our kids properly so the kids are not in overfilled classrooms and they are able to get their best learning. So I do think that that is something we may need to think about revisiting, even though it will not make everyone happy.
You're right. You're right. That does not make everyone happy. In terms of this, absolutely. I mean, I support the policy. I support the regulation. I support the numbers here. The problem is that that's not what we're actually doing. So moving on, and I've said what I need to say, but approving this isn't going to do anything because this isn't what we're actually doing. So,
okay. So would you like to request future
I don't have any.
discussion
No, I
at
don't
a
have
study
any.
session or periodic updates on the
No,
actual
we
game
actually get the
plan?
updates in the reports. So
Okay.
I mean, I monitor it. So yeah, I don't have any additional updates. We'll just keep looking at the reports that we get for the regular meetings, but thank you.
Okay, any other board member feedback on class sizes? My comment on this would be that class sizes is another one of the pieces of the overall budget puzzle. I personally don't feel compelled to propose a change in class sizes in the current school year based on all of the other things that we're dealing with and the supports that we'd like to provide to teachers. But if someone would like to propose additional discussion or conversation on that, we could table this for additional discussion at the study session. But if everyone is, I'm not going to say pleased, but satisfied to move forward with our current class sizes, then I would entertain a motion.
I move we approve it.
I will second. Having a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is item 7E, open enrollment excess capacity fiscal year 2023, again, presented by Executive Director Qualls.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board. So I have for you tonight the estimate of the excess capacity. So this would be for approving new open enrollments after assuming that we roll up all of the current students, including open enrollments from this year. And Member Clymer, if you have a specific cell that you think is off, I'd be happy to look at that. Because the intent was that it still would have them under the average target class size. So if I made a mistake, please let me know where.
No, I don't know that it's a mistake. I'm just saying, when I'm looking at the enrollment, and maybe I just want to make sure I got the updated numbers. When I'm looking at the enrollment numbers, this is from our board.
The department reports?
Yes, department reports. Thank you. I couldn't
So-
get the right word out. So looking at those individual classes, knowing that they're going to, roll up a grade, am I doing that calculation incorrectly?
So yes,
Okay.
they are going to roll up, but we're also moving teachers. So there was a spreadsheet attached to the previous agenda item that had the new averages rolled up.
This one?
No, the
Oh.
one before that. So
Okay.
the class size has an attachment that shows the students moved up and the teachers moved with them. And then a new average class size. And it probably was in the admin content only.
Right, okay, yes, I think they're not the same numbers, but similar enough. When you look at this, it doesn't matter. It's the same conversation, it's the same thing. When you look at the capacity here, do you take it from, so if you have, let's say, 4 classes and you just take, let's say they all have to be, the target is 25. If you have some that are above and some that below, you just take the full number that you have. So meaning like if you had, 22, 26, 24, you would remove 1 from 26, add 1 to 24, add 2 to 23. You see what I'm saying? Like, is that how you determine that capacity? Or is it a different mechanism?
So I look at it in total. So right now, the students in the current year are rolled forward into our data for next year, but they aren't even assigned to teachers. So I'm looking at total for the grade level versus the number of teachers. And then depending on the campus, I'm reserving extra seats for kids that may come in. So
Okay.
there may be 5 extra seats per grade level on an east side school. There could be 15 or 20 seats open on the west side, knowing that houses are coming in. So I reserve different number of seats based on the developments going on in the school.
Based on the developments going on in the school, what does that mean?
So housing developments. So on the west side.
In the area, in the school
So-
boundary. in the
So
school
we're
area.
seeing
Okay.
within the different schools on the west side, there's
Mhm.
still construction going on.
Sure.
So I reserve more seats for people moving into those homes than I do on the east side where they're established neighborhoods.
Sure, I understand. But the capacity is based on the number of seats that are based on our target class sizes, or what is
Yes.
that number? that you-
Yes, so I start with the number of teachers times the targeted class size to get the total capacity.
Mhm.
Subtract out those kids that are rolling forward that were here, and then subtract out that reserve for new students coming in. And then that amount is the excess capacity.
Okay, so why would it really matter whether there's new developments or not? I mean, there's either seats or there isn't seats. So why would it matter how much new construction there is? I mean, for someone like Belen Soto, I know they have very little capacity, but
So
I mean, there wouldn't be any extra seats. Now, if kids show up, we have to service them and we will do that. But I'm just saying, why would it matter how much development is going on if there's not any seats available?
So we're creating seats where we can. We're trying to reserve seats for those that are coming in. So once I roll forward Belen Soto, let's say fifth grade to sixth grade, if we're going from 3 to 4 teachers, I'm trying to reserve those seats that I can for
Mhm.
those that would be moving into the new development versus at the beginning of the year, trying to have everybody at the average and start off with everything full. I'm trying to
Right.
reserve seats for those that would be coming in where we have space.
Okay.
Reserve it.
The question I would have is, I understand that you may say it's 26 capacity or 28. Actually, you only enroll 24. You're saving 4 seats for new students based on what you've seen over the years, whatever. My question would be, in contract language, do you have, I assume we have the ability to transfer teachers, do we not?
Yes. So if we had an excess teacher at one campus, then yes, Superintendent Gunning would bring that to you to transfer them to another
Okay.
campus.
That is extremely rare, I will say, in my experience.
We've actually done it several times before school started, unfortunately, like right before.
Yeah, but before school starts is when we think we know what's happening, and then the first 2 weeks of school, more students show up, and then we're very hesitant to make any changes after school has actually started. So, and that's when we get to the point that we are over capacity. So, that would be my feedback. Any other comments or discussion on this agenda item? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion, we approve the class sizes.
We already approved that, but this would be a motion to approve excess capacity. Correct? We're on
Are we
excess
voting?
capacity? Yes.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Did you call for the vote?
okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Did you call for the vote or?
No, I did not call for the vote.
Okay.
Dr. Dowling moved to approve class sizes, and that item has already been approved. So Dr. Dowling, would you please modify your motion to approve excess capacity?
Okay, that's what I thought I was doing.
Okay. So Dr. Dowling has moved to approve open enrollment excess capacity
Right.
for the fiscal year 2023. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. I'm sorry, I did not mean to say no. I meant to say motion carries. Next up on our agenda is item 8A, Learning Recovery Update, presented by Superintendent Gunning. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board. We'd like to provide our update in regards to our learning recovery and all of our grant information. While we're waiting for that to load onto the screen, one of the things that we wanted to let you know that we'll be adding to this report as we get down into the different items are the date of implementation of different items, just so that way everyone can track that. Some items we implemented this year and some items will be in future years. And then that way we can also track that durational time so that we can measure growth and the impact to student achievement if we saw student achievement. So like, for example, the students receiving tutoring this year, did we see an impact this year? versus some of the other programs that will be implemented next year. So when we go through and look at the data, the reading data, I believe you've already had seen that one, our district math formative data. So we're keeping everything there for you so that you have one place, one-stop shop to review the data that we've already presented. The newest data is District Math Formative 2. This data was wrapped up right before spring break were the final makeups. So you can see how we were sitting in both TA and all of our students in relation to their progress in regards to that next section of math. And then when we get into the actual grants itself, the math curriculum adoption that was on the board tonight. Thank you for allowing us to move forward with that. Edgenuity, implemented and ongoing training has been occurring. Edgenuity we've had all year long, so we will be evaluating the usage as well as if we saw any impact with students who were absent and utilize that at the end of the year. District Math Coach, we posted that. We're in the process, we filled it or made the offer, and it's pending coming to you for governing board approval, which I would anticipate would be probably in the April meeting. That position is implemented next year, though the person will help possibly bring stipends this year to help with additional supports as we move forward with curriculum implementation and math specialists.
Wait, Jody, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure. So you said the position was filled on February 3rd, but we
Meaning that
haven't.
it was offered, the position's actually for 22-23 school year.
Okay.
So offered for them, so they haven't started their job or
I see what you're
changed it
saying.
yet.
So
Yeah.
we're going to approve it. You have a candidate. We're going to approve it. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't
That's
understand.
okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's where I think putting those dates will also be helpful because like you said, like there's some pieces that we've done already and then and implemented this year. And then there's some pieces that we're in the process of approving, but they're not implemented until next year. Middle school mental health resources. We're still in that process of reviewing what's available in federal guidelines. So we're still in the midst of the process. Math aides per school, we have posted all of those, though we still have 14 positions open. We're hoping that we'll be able to have those completely filled as we begin our next school year. District math specialists, we had 14 interviews and 7 positions were offered, and those positions will begin on the 22-23 school year. And in your time limit, it also gives you some data as we've been monitoring data so that we'll know exactly where we'll place people as we hire and fill those positions. Special education ELA intervention program, as well as the professional development that will align with that. They're going through the RFP process. So hoping that we'll have an update on that in April. Intervention programs for resources for EL students. Again, that is in process and working through that piece. I think on some things we've definitely been trying to figure out exactly the federal guidelines and some resources and what we're able to do. But they have began ordering some of those resources and hoping to have those in hand by the end of the school year. Let's see, special ed tier 3, executive skill development curriculum and professional development. They are in the RFP process. The hopes is to have that those resources in summertime for implementation into the fiscal year 23. The evidence-based supplemental math support by school. Again, we were holding on that until we approved a curriculum, a math curriculum, to see what resources they had. So then we knew what additional supplemental supports would support the curriculum at hand. Student transporter piece was complete. After school tutoring, we have 368 students throughout the district, including all schools receiving tutoring multiple times a week. And I have to commend our staff and even our leaders, everyone who has stepped up to help with tutoring. It's been amazing to see. After school clubs, we are getting the tutoring in place, and then we're working on the RFP process. So we're waiting on those all of those have come back and they're actually going through the review of the options next Monday. So that will be exciting. Summer school, they're in the planning phase of that piece. Finalizing that, we'll probably begin posting those positions towards the end of April is usually the time frame. That April timeframe is when you start hiring your teachers to support for summer school. Also, they are in the process of gathering the information and watched a webinar today to see the summer school program that the governor's office is offering to, and to see if there's any way to mesh them, or can they be meshed, or how do they support one another. Professional development for each school. This has been in process. So we have some schools that have already taken advantage of that and others that are going to plan and plot that out for the 22-23 school year. The ASU Parent Engagement, that's formerly known as our Dream Academy. We are right in the middle or the beginning stages of our spring session of that program as well. Mango Language and Ready Rosie, those are in the vendor process. So hoping to have more information soon on those, but again, with the timing, probably it will be for the 22-23 school year. So in a lot of these too, just looking at if they're a membership time or a membership component, where do we maximize that implementation? All of our care room behavior coaches have still been hired, so that's still awesome. And the care room supplies actually just received a recent update. The list is provided and they're in the process of ordering those. So those were the ones that we also had to review. Mr. Spivey had gone through and gave them options of what would be compliant with federal dollars and grant dollars. And then our mental health professional development, again, this is a component that we were actually able to do in-house. And so we will reassess at the beginning of next year to see what additional professional development is needed in this area. And still waiting to hear from the other grant that we put in December. So we have not heard back yet.
I will open up the floor for questions or discussion, but I have a comment I'd like to make first. Thank you for adding at the next reiteration of this dates and a more tight timeline. I will say that I am overall disappointed at what appears to be us dragging our feet to spend this $9 million. We have implemented a piece of tutoring, Edgenuity, a piece of the Dream Academy, and our care room behavior techs. Everything else on this list seems to be being delayed for the 2022-2023 school year, which is exactly what the board said we did not want to happen. We wanted to start this learning recovery immediately. So I guess my question would be, do we need to spend some of this grant money, or do we need to put into our budget discussion at the end of this month additional resources to help the planning process? Because so many of these items we are saying, we are looking into this, we are planning this. Who is we? If we are short-staffed, do we need to hire more staff so that we can adequately spend these funds that we have been given in a fiscally responsible and timely manner? So I would welcome any feedback that the administration might have on how we can help you to get these plans, not only the plans in place, but also the implementation of these in place. Any other board member feedback?
I would say part of the delay has been the RFP process, and that's getting vendors who also want, it's just a different dynamic that we haven't seen, right? So we might just get one vendor response or one response, or we're missing pieces. So that's been a struggle, I know, on the purchasing side, that I know that has been a struggle for our purchasing department.
And I
on
understand that
those
the
pieces.
curriculum was always intended to be implemented in the next school year,
Mhm.
but a lot of the hiring and some of the smaller dollar amount programs, specifically, as you know, I repeatedly wanted the district math coach as well as the district math specialist to start sooner rather than later. And I am disappointed that no one is starting until the next school year.
Well, and I know that several of the math specialists were out of district, so they were not going to be able to come because they're completing their contract this year. So we did hire both externally and internally. And I don't know if you have any comment on it. Our district math coach. I know that they're ready and willing to support, to be ready for that process. And the hiring for math aides, I mean, we'll hire if people would apply. So that's been definitely a struggle. So we filled the positions that we can definitely fill. And even with the math specialists, we're still recruiting because we want to have every single position. So we're not stopping. We'll keep recruiting and hiring for those positions.
I understand that. Thank you for your additional information, Superintendent Gunning. Again, if there's anything that you would like the board to consider from a budgetary standpoint to be able to support these programs, please let us know. We'd be happy to discuss that in our study session.
I just wanted to add, if you don't mind,
Yeah, go ahead.
about the math coach. So the math coach that will come to you for approval for the district math coach is an 8th grade math teacher at L. Thomas Heck. So no, we don't feel comfortable pulling her from that position to put her into the district position, but she was here tonight. She's been on our math committee. She's with Dr. Pearson and I in lots of meetings and planning for the specialists. And as far as the math specialists go, we have those hired, but I know there's more interviews going on this week. They're constantly interviewing because, the way that we've looked at the data and Brian's pulled it off for us, all of our Title I schools will have 2 math specialists to start the year. So they initially did round 1, Barbara Roby got 2. Now we're back up to all of them having 2. So they're in the process of making those moves and interviewing those, so that the first round was a group effort where lots of people participated in lots of interviews. We did that first batch, and then now moving on, they're doing it individually at their sites. So that is moving along.
Okay, thank you, Executive Director DeCoste.
I had a question about the math specialist. Looking here, I can see, Ms. DeCoste, as you just said, Barbara Roby has 2, Corte Sierra, they have them listed here, not all schools, but just the ones that will be getting the math specialist based on the current math benchmark. Litchfield Elementary School is mentioned here, but when we were just on our school showcase, she said she was not going to be getting one. So has that been updated or?
That was before Math Formative 2 and before Brian and I had a chance to sit down and really look at the best way to look at long-term historical data to decide who gets a math specialist and who needs that. So in the initial, Litchfield Elementary was not initially in there because in the last year, they had some pretty good growth, but over the last 4 years, their growth has not been comparable to other schools. So they fell into that range where so Brian pulled all of the data, and I can share that with you guys. And then we set a cut point for what Brian would think would be, appropriate growth for each school. And then we distributed the math specialists for anyone below that cut point. Or actually, it's a higher number, so it's above that cut point. So the higher the number, the more. And Litchfield Elementary falls into that. So
okay, no, that's fine. I was just saying we just had a whole conversation about it. That's why I was asking, because I'm glad to see that. I mean, they're probably excited about getting one, but I just was wondering because we just had that conversation. So is it possible that after the data from the rest of this year, as we move into next year, that there might be additional people hired if there are schools that show that they need it?
We will hire all 16 positions. And then what would happen is that shifting might happen if based on, like, say someone else fell into that category of needing a math specialist, then we would take instead of the next highest person having 2, they would have 1, and the next school that fell in would have 1. And that's our plan. And that's the thing, is it keeps changing because our data keeps changing. So we initially went with, we need to get these people hired and we need to get moving on this. So we took what data we had, and then we took formative 2, and then we sat down and looked at a long range plan to make sure that before we hire the other half of what we're allotted for, that we have a really good plan in place. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. Doesn't look like, just with the discrepancy in the points and the way that Brian looked at it historically since 2016, 17, I think we went back that far, that there would be enough movement that there'd be crazy movements. Like there might be 1 maybe, but it'll probably be pretty steady with what you see in front of you.
Is there any opportunity, I guess, and this is, again, I'm pulling from a money tree I don't have, but I'm just asking the question. As you're saying, there's going to be all of our Title I schools will have 2, then others will sort of go down from there depending on the growth. So if I'm just going to use Litchfield as an example, I don't know their data, so it's just using them because they're the last one we're talking about. So if Litchfield is the one that's sort of on the cusp of going one way or the other, they would potentially lose their math specialist to somebody else that I guess needed it more. Is there a way to say, okay, we're going to maintain a minimum of 16 positions? I think that's what we're allotted for.
Right.
And then if we do see, if there's another school that falls below that line or above that line, whatever, that needs it, to hire an additional person rather than taking a resource from a school that still needs it, we're just changing the target line. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Is that a possibility to do that?
There, in the budget, probably not, but there are 2 allotted. So you would still have the math aides, if we can get them hired, running and a specialist there running the program, but you would pull another specialist to support another school. And there we've talked about, we haven't had time to, that comes at our next meeting with admin on March 31st, is talking about what this looks like and sharing that data that I'm talking to you about right now. But and what's the best way to move people? So would it be that let's say the scenario you just suggested happens. So do we possibly take 1 specialist from that campus for 4 days a week? They still go on Monday or something, and they look at data and they plan for PLCs and they make sure everything's ready to go. And then they go to the next campus for 4 days and do that similar thing that they did for a startup at that school. So.
Okay, I understand. And really the reason, I just want to be really clear, the reason I'm asking is not to get into the data, because that is not my area of expertise and not my job, but to say, as we're going through this budget process now, obviously, I think all of us, not just the board, but the administration, thinks that these positions are really important and really necessary. And we know that math is one of those areas that we really need to decrease those learning gaps. I don't want to have all of these resources and not be able to give them, have them for the schools that need them just because someone else is worse off. So if we say we're going to hire 16, as we're going through this budget process, when you guys come back to us at the end of the month with your recommendation in that budget, is there a possibility that you say, okay, we recommend that we hire 3, I'm just, again, making the scenario up, additional instructional coaches, or 1 coach and 2 math specialists or something? I just want to say we're having all these resources, but then we're already saying we're going to run out and we haven't started yet. So I just want to make sure that we're open to the possibility that this could not be enough.
Right. And I think that's what we need to do. And that's where the part of having this scorecard and tracking the data is going to really help us to see, are they effective? I don't know. We don't know the impact that they will have, but if they do have a strong impact, then that can be something that we could come to you and say, like, here's the data. And here's where we see that this needs to be, like Dr. Dowling would say, something beyond a grant, that it's something that we need to be able to maintain and sustain after the fact. The other piece was really looking at and maintaining that commitment to equity and really putting the folks where they're desperately needed. But determining what checkpoints are they going to be, I would not recommend like 1 checkpoint, like 1 formative, and then you're like, oh, you're fine now, we're taking you away.
Of course.
But doing it over a very like set time frame so that everybody knows and can kind of time for that. It was a different process for interviewing because we had to make sure that every person that committed to interviewing, that they were aware that they could move at any given point in their tenure. So they might be at one school for a year and they may be at a different school a different year, which we've done overall with ELL for many years. But we wanted to make sure that they had that commitment and they understood that that piece. So we'll continue to monitor that data and then be able to adjust. But we knew that we had already applied for those positions, so we'll definitely want to fill all of those. And if we see that another school kind of drops in monitoring their overall growth over the past 4 years, as well as their proficiencies, even finishing up this year, that'll give us more flexibility as we go into next year.
Yeah, I just, we work on year horizons, so we can't pivot quickly. And so just making sure that if we say we're going to have the resources, that we at least have a proactive plan that says this is what's going to happen when we have less need or we have more need or whatever. So anyway, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
I got 2 quick questions. The Mango language license for families, so is that for non-English speaking use at home? That's
Yes.
very good. I'm approve of that. I think that's a great idea. And then the second question I had was, who was the math teacher that we were gonna use as a math specialist, but decided you couldn't use because you needed this person teaching that was here tonight?
The person that we would like to bring to the board for approval for the district math coach position is currently an 8th grade teacher in math at L. Thomas Heck.
At which school?
L. Thomas Heck Middle School.
Oh, okay.
So we don't want to pull her from her math class
Perfect.
because
Thank you.
we're already short math teachers. Okay.
Any other questions for Superintendent Gunning on the learning recovery update? Thank you for the presentation, and we look forward to an update at our next regular meeting. Next on our agenda is item 8B, the school district spending report, presented by Executive Director Pauls.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board. So tonight I have a quick presentation on the school district spending report. It's issued by the Auditor General. I'm Wendy Qualls, the Executive Director of Finance. The Arizona revised statute requires the Arizona Auditor General to monitor the percentage of each dollar that's spent in a classroom for all Arizona school districts. So to meet the requirement, they annually issue a report for the entire state, looking at the entire state average, and then also a page for each district. The report was issued on March 1st of this year, and it's available on the Auditor General's website. So when we're looking at the report, there is operational spending. And operational spending is basically the day-to-day operations of the district. We follow the Arizona Uniform Chart of Accounts for school districts. This is in line with the U.S. Department of Education's account classification. So that way at the U.S. Department of Education level, they not only can compare Arizona within Arizona, but also across the country. So in the report, it talks about classroom spending. Instructional is actually in the classroom. It's teachers, it's supplies used in the classroom, textbooks, band, tuition, if we're paying tuition for students. When we look at student support, those are the staff and supplies that provide nursing service, speech, OT, PT. We have instructional support services, which is salaries and benefits and supplies for different director levels, such as curriculum, special ed, also for the technology-related employees and technology that's used in the classroom. Non-classroom spending consists of administration,
which administration includes not only the superintendent and executive directors that you would think of, it also includes accounting, payroll, purchasing, warehouse, human resources, administrative technology. When we're looking at plant and maintenance, that would be salaries, benefits, and other costs for the buildings and to keep equipment repaired. Also for heating, lighting, and our property insurance. Food service is the food service program. So salaries, benefits, food supplies, other supplies they need for lunch, like silverware, trays. And then transportation, that would include our student transporters, our monitors, operating the buses, repairing the buses, the fuel. There's also non-operational spending. So non-operational spending would be things outside of the day-to-day activities. So it'd be more of our capital purchases if we were purchasing land, buildings, if we're doing any renovations or improvements to the grounds, or equipment if we're buying computers, buses, or other equipment. Interest is considered non-operational spending, along with other items such as community education programs. So when we look at classroom spending, the Auditor General's report includes instruction at 60.7% of each dollar going into instruction, student support at 9.2%, instructional support at 4.1%. So in total, when you add those three categories together, we're at 74% supporting the students. Non-classroom administration's 8.8%, plant operations 10.9%, food service at 2.8%, and transportation at 3.5%. So in total, non-classroom spend is about 26% of each dollar. They group us into peers based on size or student count, geographic information. They group us into peers to look at our operational and instructional spending. So I have listed for you our peers. So our peer group average into classroom spend only is 56. Kyrene is the highest at 61.9, and then we're second at 60.7%. And then the lowest would be Roosevelt at 50.4. When we look at the prior year of 2020 versus 2021, we increased our operational spend by about $700 per student, and our non-operational decreased. Another component of the report is when we get compared to our peers and the state average, they look at administration, the spending per pupil, and then the students per administrative position. So our district, when we're looking at state and peers, we're considered very low. When we look at plant operations, they're looking at spending per square foot and the square footage per student. Our spending per square foot is higher than our peers, but our square footage per student is lower than our peers. So we're effectively using our space, but we're having to air condition and heat and maintain that entire space. We aren't able to close off areas and not have as high maintenance costs. When we look at food service, they're looking at the spend per meal and the meals per student. Normally, we're very low. This is the first year that we're very high. And if we think about it, this was the year that we were closed at the beginning. Parents could choose online. Costs were more expensive for food service. We had to package the food differently. We had cash available in our food funds, so we retained our staff. We didn't RIF anyone, put them onto unemployment. We maintained them. And this cost, while it's very high, it was all borne by the food service program fund. It didn't come from maintenance and operations. So the food service fund was able to support and retain those employees. So I would anticipate in the next year, when they're looking at 21, 22, that we'll be back down closer to the state average and our peers. Transportation, since there was minimal transportation going on statewide, they didn't compare us to our peers. They just compared us to ourselves, basically, in a state average, but they were very close. Between the state average is $7.22 per mile and ours at $7.27. But again, that's going to just fluctuate because of the pandemic and the operation. When we look at average teacher salary, the top blue line is the district's information, and then the dotted line is the state average. So we, starting back in 2017, is as far back as this report goes, we are higher than the state average, and we have maintained and continued to be higher than the state average. The bottom lighter blue line is the amount of Proposition 301 or classroom site fund that each teacher receives. And you can see each year that slowly increased. So we've been consistent on the funds that are coming from the classroom site fund. When we look at students per teacher, in 2017, we were at 21.5. And in 2021, we're at 18.7. We look at average teacher experience. We have slowly increased our average teacher experience. And that's one of the numbers that would decrease generally when we open a new school. And so then it would have to slowly build back up. And we are getting close to the state average on our teacher experience, but we're still slightly below. Percentage of teachers in their first 3 years, we're at 14%. For the 21 school year, we had 14% of our teachers in their first 3 years. So I also wanted to present for you the average teacher salary of our peer group. So you can see here we have Alhambra is the highest in our peer group at $66,324 in total, of which they pay the $7,767 from classroom site fund. So the left column is the total, and it includes the amount that's in the classroom site fund. So on this list, the peer average is $57,303, and Litchfield is at $62,953. So we are the second highest in our peer group. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, could you explain to me, the Prop 301 is separate from the salary, correct?
So this average salary amount includes the classroom site fund. So the average is all compensation. And then I would just want to show for you the amount that came out of the classroom site fund.
Okay.
What accounts for those differences? You know, you look at someone like Glendale who's paying over $9,000 and then others that are $6,000. What accounts for that big of difference between them?
So it would depend on how the funds are being used. So for example, in the third pot, we're paying instructional assistants. If we weren't paying instructional assistants from the classroom site funds, then, and we chose to put that into teacher salary, then our number would be a little higher.
Okay.
Also, it would have to do with carryover, any budget balance that they had remaining.
Okay, so just individual decisions that they're making kind of in these pots of money of who they give it to might increase or decrease this number.
Yes.
Based on whatever decisions their district has made over the, okay, understood. Thank you. Any other questions for Executive Director Qualls?
Good report.
I do not have any. Thank you. Yes, I'm very pleased with the report as always. Love that we have low administrative costs. I know we will be impacting that slightly with our new position that we are adding the deputy superintendent, but I believe we'll still be under the average of our peers, even with the addition of that resource. Thank you, Executive Director Qualls.
That's a good point.
Next on our agenda is item 9A, which is Superintendent Gunning's report.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board. We're excited to end our year in a strong way, in a strong fashion. Each step and each board meeting, it seems like we have one more, like you were saying, Danielle, one more step closer to getting back to a more typical timeframe. This timeframe of year is also very exciting because something that we'll be bringing back is our fundraiser through our foundation. And we're so grateful to our community partners and our board of directors for all the monies that they raised to celebrate our staff at the end of the year. Similarly, just so proud of our governing board members who have donated countless hours over the last month. Board members Idema attended job fair, White Tanks Learning Center in Litchfield, President Moran, Young Authors Week, Board member Climber, Young Authors Week, White Tanks, and visiting Litchfield, and Dr. Dowling visiting Litchfield Elementary. So thank you for that. Of course, we celebrated earlier with our Verado Heritage Lighthouse celebration, and then been out and about at lots of those showcases and apple pie tours. So we've been able to visit many of our schools and celebrate all the learning. As well as I was very honored to be invited as a VIP guest to the Buckeye Air Show, along with to be able to partner with the mayor, and always appreciate all of the support of our municipal partners. In February, on February 17th, we had the opportunity where one of our community members reached out to us and noticed that our flag on the side of Litchfield needed a little bit of attention. And with that brought an amazing relationship and partnership with our Litchfield Flag Club. We were so grateful for to be able to raise the brand new flag in the memorial on the west side of the school. And Luke Memorial Museum, as well as the Blue Star Moms, came out. And the Luke Memorial Museum has already scooped up those kiddos and planning for them to ride in the Litchfield Holiday Parade next year, because they have many really fun vehicles, military vehicles that they bring out for the parade. And they said this is a perfect group to be riding in them. So it was a fun event and something that was very exciting. And then I know that by April, we'll have even more exciting news to share with you in regards to some celebrations that are coming.
Excellent. Thank you, Superintendent Gunning. Next, we will hear the reports from our governing board members. Board member Honak, would you like to start? Would you like to start with your board report?
Okay. So I saw a movie last night that was called Whose Children Are They? And it was kind of a shocker. I'd been doing a little bit of research, and I've always just kind of wondered why our schools were the best in the world, and now we're with seemingly way more resources, we're struggling. So it's kind of a weird title, Whose Children Are They? But you know, when we had the best schools in the world, nobody questioned who the children's were. They were the parents' children. Then the communists got involved in education, and it failed miserably after the Russian Revolution, and communism enslaved the Eastern Bloc after World War II. And so the communists knew they're never going to convince Americans that communism was a great idea. Although today, I don't know what's going on. But they decided to infect the schools. And under the Carter administration, the Department of Education was formed. And unbelievably, if you read the charter of the Department of Education, it has many relatively hidden statements that say that the purpose of schools are to undermine the morals of children and to destroy the family. And this is what, of course, communists really live to do. They would figure out every way to tear down the freest country in the world because they can't stand up to us. So, you know, when the Soviet Union dissolved and the Berlin fell down, communism was just, again, just blatantly shown to be an utter complete failure. Cuba and Eastern Europe completely rebelled against it, escaped. I mean, I remember Hungary that went in and just, the Russians just went in, just massacred people, made it look, and they did a big revolution and they tried, and they were just shattered and gassed and everything, making Ukraine look like a party. So, after that, the communists decided they couldn't push communism. So they fabricated the global warming myth. I can say over 70 years, they've said we're going to freeze to death. I mean, it's disaster after disaster. Not a single one has ever happened. Right now, it's a myth that carbon, I'm a physicist, a scientist. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Just look at the data. Has absolutely nothing to do with carbon. The graphs that Al Gore showed, carbon lags behind the temperature. It's an effect, not a cause. Spoiler alert, it's sunspots, it's cosmic rays, it's solar wind, 100% correlation for 1,000 years. But here we go. So they also, the same people that had to use global warming to destroy our economy in every way they could, make us do green stuff. They go out and just burn coal like crazy and advance their economies. But they also had renewed efforts to take over schools. So the public is really onto the CRT, the public hates it, okay? But equity sounds nice and they keep changing names. But honestly, equity is just plain communism. It's equal outcomes. It's saying we're going to manipulate, we're going to control until we theoretically get equal results. So it all sounds nice, but the problem with this preferential treatment is who makes the decision? Who makes the decision that, oh, we need to give so-and-so more and so less? And that's the problem. There isn't anybody. It's just a license for corruption. It always happens. And you watch Ukraine, Venezuela, whatever, go down the tubes, everything going perfectly in a country, unbelievable wealth, and look at them eating out of trash cans. So Putin thinks he deserved preferential treatment and Ukraine should pay for it. I mean, Putin thinks he's making Russia great and this and that and whatever, but he doesn't really care about what happens to real people. And so you got a beautiful country of people courageous and whatever, and look at what's going on. So does he think his ideas are good for Ukrainians? No, he doesn't care. He obviously doesn't care, he could care less. And that's the problem with people that get these great visionary ideas, is that they think the greater good means that you can just go ahead and squish individuals. So Joe Biden shut down on his day one American energy. He's lying about it now, but he said, I am turning it completely off, everything, canceled Keystone Pipeline, no more permits, no more whatever. And basically what he did is he financed Putin. If you look at Putin, every time he's gone and squished a country, it's when oil prices have been high.
Board Member Honak, I have a hard time understanding how this relates to Litchfield Elementary School Board.
I am talking about our schools.
I am.
And you don't have the right to veto me. Okay, you don't have the right to veto me.
I don't have an understanding of how this relates to our schools. If you could please.
I'll talk louder because we have a school board member that holds up a sign saying to the public, you're lying and you're wrong. And you guys reelected her. So keep your mouth shut and I'm going to finish.
I would like for
you know what? You break the law and you're breaking it right now.
I am not breaking the law.
You are breaking the law. You know what? You
I am
did.
not.
The Attorney General said you did. You said I was not on the agenda.
Decorum.
And then you're not stopping me now. And you stopped me back then. You're not going to stop me now. By the way, this district is being sued and under criminal investigation. So why don't you just let me finish and we can go home in peace? Because I have a nice ending to the story.
I will let you finish if you would please relate it to the Litchfield Elementary School District and your.
You have no right to tell me whether I'm on the agenda or not. I have the floor. I decide that. Afterwards,
no, that is not correct.
You can make an open meeting law complaint.
That is not.
You can't stop me.
The purpose of the board member reports is.
You know
for the
what?
board members
You
to
know what?
report
You have
on
no
their
standing here.
activities.
You know what?
They-
You're the one that has an open meeting violation. Okay? So Joe
Mr.
Biden
O'Connor.
shut it down. He didn't give anything. Well, let me tell you, there are two components of communism. Doing stupid things that harm people.
I'm sorry,
And
board
stupid
member
people
Lima?
thinking communism is a good idea. The parents told you
Okay,
they didn't want equity. They
I make a
wanted
motion to
academics.
adjourn the meeting.
The parents said that. Listen to this.
I second.
Clown over here.
All those in favor?
Okay?
All those in
And what did
favor
you
to
do? You
adjourn the
immediately
meeting?
voted for equity. You
All
said,
those
hell,
in
you don't care
favor
about the
to
parents.
adjourn the
You think
meeting?
you own the children.
All those in
Okay.
favor to adjourn the
Shut
meeting?
the hell up.
All
Shut
those
up.
in favor to adjourn the meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Does the board care
Meeting is
about
adjourned.
parents?